Hello, dear listeners. In case you did not read the show notes, a quick content advisor and programming note on this episode. Because this is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's set in a fantasy version of Los Angeles. We recorded this back in December, and now, of course, the wildfires are happening, and I don't think the fire comes up in the episode in any context, but it still might be upsetting even to just hear the names of some of the neighborhoods that we're doing fantasy versions of in here. So if the wildfires in Los Angeles hit at all close to home for you, please refer to the show notes. We have a very detailed content warning that even gets into, like, again, all the individual neighborhoods that we're doing fantasy versions of in here. So take care of yourself. If this is something that you can't listen to right now, my gosh, your mental health is more important than a silly Ravenloft Disney podcast. Speaking of mental health and silly podcasts, we thought about delaying this episode given the circumstances, but I know that in 2020, my ridiculous nonsense podcasts were the only thing that got me through some days. And if this ridiculous nonsense podcast has been a thing that, like, you've been looking forward to, we don't want to take that away from anybody. So we are releasing the podcast today, but if you can't listen to it, please don't. We're begging you. Enjoy. The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 30. Langeles. For my first few hours in Langeles, I saw no sign of what made the domain unique. Its magical technology was impressive, yes, but not dissimilar from what I had seen in San Francisco. I spoke with several people who had opinions on Langeles' most notorious citizens, but it was some time before I glimpsed any of them for myself. As I passed through a particularly wealthy neighborhood, I saw a building undergoing construction or renovation, some kind of concert hall, its high walls swooping into bizarre curves that would be impossible to form without magic. As I watched, enormous flying oxen with improbable proportions and coloration floated just above the building's curved gables, bearing incredible amounts of weight. Tiny sprite-like creatures, each wearing an exaggerated smile, buzzed about taking building materials from the backs of the oxen and applying them to the walls. I could guess that the oxen were living manifestations of Tensor's floating disc, while the sprites were likely mage hand or stone shape. They were some of the intelligent living spells known colloquially as runes. While their presence could have been a source of pure wonder to the people of Langeles, their joy and exuberance was no match for the darkness in some mortal hearts.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft Domains of Dread, but only when it's funny.
Along the way, we'll look at the Dark Lord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate this setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah!
So I bet you immediately have a question. And that is like, what, really?
But how?
But how? Which was our question for a long time.
Yes, it took us a while to crack.
This is a big one, yeah. So before we go into anything, we need to explain basically in this universe, in this Ravenloft domain, what is a cartoon?
What on earth is a toon?
What is a toon?
And a Toontown.
And so we want to do Roger Rabbit. It's a great movie. Judge Doom's so amazing.
Ever made.
It's so good. We'll go into why it's great later. Mm-hmm. But there's that initial core thing of like, okay, no, it's so specifically cartoons.
Yeah, like they can't be elves.
Yeah, they can't be elves.
It can't just be fantasy racism, like.
For a while, we were toying with something with the Feywild and having them be like Fey creatures, but for neither, that didn't work for either of us.
Yeah, just couldn't quite get that zing.
I think you need like that particular connection, like for just this story to work. The toon analog needs to be a kind of human creation.
Yeah.
It needs to be like made a construct, like maybe constructs, but that doesn't quite work either to have them all be robot. And then this was all you. I was flipping through the Eberron book as one does in a quiet hour. And I found there's living spells.
Yes.
And it was like, boom,
Shakalaka.
Living spells. That is it. That is our tunes. And I realized it was even more than any other thing. I could call them runes. And we could have our domain name, you'll see on the write-up, Rune.
And you've already heard D say.
Runetown. And so, in Eberron, which you'll hear more of that word again a couple times, the living spell...
I hope Tom's Eberron Minute is on your bingo card.
Yes, because here we are. But living spells are more just a kind of monster, almost kind of elemental made of magic. Mm-hmm. So, like, the stat blocks are just seeing them as kind of these, like, mindless combat. Basically, this magical, scarred wasteland. They're one of the hazards you can encounter there.
Ah, okay.
And the idea of these sort of crazy magic stuff of this war, some spells came to life, but as I said, they're almost elementals. They're kind of mindless, and they're kind of there to just be like a cool hazard, and the reason they're living spells is sort of to show how, like, crazy the war magic was.
Right.
But we're imagining, you don't need to have it in Eberron, though you should, and we'll talk about that later, in a minute, in a particular minute of this podcast. And we're imagining... whatever this home place was that this domain came from originally, there was some kind of magical action or energy surge and magical things came to life. And it has to be things with a kind of physical presence. Mm-hmm. So we're imagining like magical items or spell scrolls or potions, or it's not like every spell everyone did came to life.
Right,
it was just magical, enchanted, physical objects came to life and became living things.
If you want to keep this self-contained within Ravenloft, you can really easily do this with Aslan. Again, we'll talk more about that later.
And those things came to life and are now living sentient creatures. This is a shift from the Eberron living spells. Like, those are more elementals. These are more like, no, they're people with personalities, with intelligence, with free will. But they're still compelled to follow their spell nature. And it's not that they must, but that this kind of gives them joy and sustenance. Mm-hmm. We'll dig into more mechanics later, but just to try not to front load this. So, like, with Roger Rabbit, I remember this was your idea.
Mm-hmm. Roger Rabbit is Tasha's hideous laughter.
Yes, he is. So he's compelled to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't need, he's a good guy. He doesn't need to do it in like a hostile or creepy way.
No, it's not an attack laugh.
But his nature is to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. And one more thing before we get into the episode proper.
Yes.
We are imagining that, like, magical energy can make them more powerful. And we have this great metric of it can raise their spell level. Mm-hmm. So maybe Larry Laughter, Roger Laughter, whatever. So Hideous Laughter is in the default of first level, but the idea, because he's this super successful entertainer, he makes so many people laugh so often, he's actually like a 5th or 6th level version of this spell. And this is important because this is why you have an economy. Mm-hmm. Like, this is why they have a physical need. Mm-hmm. And so they have jobs. Why would he even go and work as an entertainer?
Yeah, like, Tasha's Hideous Laughter doesn't need to eat or pay rent.
Yeah, but here is why, because having that access to people in comedy clubs, whatever, performances, plays, sustains him and makes him more powerful. And that's sort of what all the spells are doing. So why is a big gorilla spell being a bouncer at the Ink and Paint Club? Like, because it's his nature. And because it gives
he's a shield spell, so he has to protect the performers.
He has to protect, and that sustains him. As he protects them, it makes him more powerful.
Why is Jessica Rabbit performing at the Ink and Paint Club, even though she, like, clearly doesn't have any interest in anybody except Roger? Because she's Charm Person.
Yes, she is. Charm Person.
I could also see her being Hypnotic Patter.
And so, yes, so this gives us that core thing you need to have that kind of tunes as part of life and as part of the economy. It's kind of weird thing I think about. It's like, okay, why do they get a job? Why did Jessica Rabbit get a job?
Right.
And it's that, because they need magical energy and they need to fulfill their function. So, long, like, forefront aside that I am making will saves as we speak to not be, like, slipping into details. She's watching my face.
I'm watching his face, and we're... we already have a bunch of outtakes from the beginning as Tom, like, has his false starts, trying desperately to talk more about Eberron.
So in the morning, all right, now that we've laid out the sort of basic world building necessary to even talk about this as a setting, we can get into our episode proper, and we can talk about the initial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that inspired us to go through all these mental gymnastics in our discussion of our Dark Lord of this setting, in a section we like to call
The Lord. The Lord. There has always been a level of tension between the mortals of Langeles and the residents of Runetown, partly for reasons I will enumerate shortly, and partly because of the rune's chaotic nature. While the origin of runes is not entirely clear, it seems to stem from wild magic, as even the most sober of runes shows an inclination toward mischief and chaos. While some mortals find this endearing, others are infuriated by the havoc they bring. Things have only become worse with the election of Runetown's new judge, a ruthless man with the apt, if unfortunate, name of Judge Doom. It is an open secret that Doom, whose pockets are seemingly bottomless, although no one knows how he came by his tremendous wealth, attained the position through a combination of bribes and blackmail. Doom has vowed to reign in the misrule of Runetown. Because of the eccentric nature of runes, a campaign against misrule is a thin veneer covering a campaign against their very existence. To this end, Doom has fired or discredited every rune member of law enforcement who could stand against him, from Quick Draw McGraw to Inspector Gadget, and replaced them with a gang of personal enforcers called the Rune Patrol. Worse yet, he has invented a magic item called Dip for the sole purpose of executing runes who are convicted of crimes. It should come as no surprise that trials for runes are short, with arrest, conviction, and execution often occurring within the same hour. When I interviewed Doom, he attempted to persuade me as to the dangers of runes and their wild magic. Given my own recent reservations about magic, it is a testament to Doom's utterly cold and charmless nature that I did not find him remotely convincing. He seemed particularly focused on the potential danger of the concert hall I had seen, claiming that the maniacal runes could not be trusted to build anything safe, and that those who entered it would be taking their lives into their hands. According to others I spoke to, the crusade against the concert hall was Doom's latest hobby horse. Unsurprising, perhaps, as its successful construction would serve as continued proof that runes have a valuable role to play.
Judge Doom, right?
Right, yeah. Sometimes there's a question, and sometimes it's Judge Doom.
Yeah, we're like, if we can make Judge Doom work, if we can make Toontown work, we can make Judge Doom work, we can have him as a character in our little Disney Ravenloft constellation, a star in our firmament, and we want to do that so bad.
We will do anything to have Judge Doom be a Dark Lord, Mr. Valiant. Anything.
Like, whatever obscure supplements I have to dig into to find a Toon equivalent, it's worth it for Judge Doom. Mm-hmm. So, Judge Doom. You know who he is if you are a Gen X or later millennial or had cool parents.
He's Christopher Lloyd.
But you might not know what a Dark Lord is because maybe you just clicked on this because you like Roger Rabbit.
Go you.
So, Rachel, what is a Dark Lord?
Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that causes the dark powers to say, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pluck that evil being up and they place them in a domain that is a special hell tailor-made just for them. There are some really great iconic Dark Lords. There are some really not so great Dark Lords. So we are going to discuss the 4 qualities that separate the 3rd and 5th edition Hazlicks from the 2nd edition Hazlicks. So go back to that Hazlan. And instead of talking about Hazlick, we're going to be talking about how those elements apply to the Dark Lord of all Dark Lords, Strahd von Zarovich. So the first element is that act of ultimate darkness. They did some specific evil thing that drew the dark powers' attention. They didn't just wander around daydreaming about getting revenge for getting hate crime. 2nd edition Hazlick.
Monsters.
Yeah. And in Strahd's case, it was that he killed his brother because he wanted to get with his brother's fiancée. Our second element is what they call in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft the Torment, because we're a Disney podcast, we call it they got what they wanted, they lost what they had. And in Strahd's case, it's congratulations, you did kill your brother, he's out of the way, you have eternal youth, so you're not too old for Tatiana anymore, but you're too Strahd for Tatiana, and you always will be. Our third element is an element of tragedy and relatability. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something about them that makes us wince in sympathy. This was a real challenge for JoJo.
Yeah, right. Honestly, a lot of these were.
Yeah. And in Strahd's case, it's that unrequited love is just the worst. And then our final element is that the domain reflects the Dark Lord and their curse in some way. Strahd is the Dark Lord of spooky gothic vampire land. He is not the Dark Lord of Toontown. That would be something.
You'd probably be miserable. You wouldn't like it.
I have a t-shirt with Chibi Strahd on it. That would probably be the Dark Lord of Toontown. And also Barovia is a boring mud slump to reflect that curse of loneliness. That he's lonely because he can't be with Tatiana, and he's also lonely within Barovia because there aren't any intellectual equals to him there.
So, dear listener, sometimes we'll look at a Disney movie, and we'll be like, wow, the villain or other main character fit so well. All of these things.
The genesis of this podcast came from watching The Lion King and saying, holy potatoes, Scar is just a Dark Lord.
Yeah, he's just a Dark Lord. Or we were like, Abuela, almost everything's there. We just need to, like, make it a little darker and more violent, some of the backstory stuff. This is not one of those times.
No.
This is... I think there is, like, none of these... except possibly the domain reflecting the Dark Lord. That's like there in the material. We had to like
kind of the Act of Ultimate Darkness.
Kind of an Act of Ultimate Darkness. Yes, we had to sort of backfill. A lot of this and go through all the crazy metaphysical hoops of creating a Toontown in Dungeons and Dragons, and it is totally worth it because Judge Doom is so great.
That's how much we love Judge Doom.
And how much we are determined to, like, get him in here.
Yes.
Get him on our squad. Mm-hmm. So, the first of those 4 qualities of a good Dark Lord is that act of ultimate darkness. And to sort of talk about our idea of Judge Doom, we have to get into our conception of him as a living spell. And I think this was you?
Yes. Our first thought was to go with the gag and have him be the spell Doom. But we decided that doesn't really work for his whole shtick. Mm-hmm. So then we decided to have him be a living counter spell.
Yes.
And so his nature is negation, and especially negation of the other runes.
Yes, and this is such an important, like, thing. Like, there's not a lot of Judge Doom's personality, except he's so evil. But you do get, like, this guy...
looking for a murderer.
Hates tunes.
Yes.
He hates tunes. Like, legitimately. This is not just, you know, crush the tunes under his boots for money and power. This like he hates tunes.
He hates tunes.
Like, he wants all the money and power that'll come from the freeway, but, like, more than anything, he loves that they're bulldozing Toontown.
Yeah. And having him be a counterspell that his entire purpose is to destroy tunes, or in this case, runes, just worked perfectly for our purposes.
And then he almost needs to do this to be sustained.
Yeah.
To exist. And the more he does this, the more personal power he gets. And the more satisfaction, the more sense of, like, I'm in the correct place, I'm doing the correct thing that he gets.
Because we're imagining, dear listeners, this is not the first time we've cited World of Darkness, nor will it be the last. But that them doing their function kind of works like your glamour pool, your blood pool, your quintessence pool, like all of those like pools of personal power that you would accumulate in a World of Darkness game and then spend for bennies.
Or even it's like your nature demeanor.
Yeah.
Or in the New World, your like virtue and vice. The whole, when you do this, you gain inner strength.
Yeah. And so this is the thing that Judge Doom has to do in order to regain willpower / get quintessence / whatever.
And so much like in the movie, he was like some kind of criminal. He robbed a bank. He stole 1 million simoleons. And he killed Teddy Valley in the process, which we'll loop back to. And he managed to use that money to get elected the judge of Runetown. And he uses that position to enhance his own money and power. But fundamentally, he wants to make the world more ordered.
Yes.
Like, we have that stuff with the freeway. Oh, it's so good.
It's so good.
You're going to hear a lot about that, because that's one of our big, like, Judge Doom personality motivation moments. But this, like, for him, paradise and utopia is a freeway.
Yeah, and that says so much about it.
Yes. Paradise, utopia, my God, it will be beautiful, is a giant asphalt strip with gas stations and restaurants serving quickly prepared meals, and cars getting on and off and on and off and just flowing, and traffic jams will be a thing of the past.
And beautiful billboards as far as the eye can see.
And that's what his vision of the world is. He wants the world to be ordered. He wants the world to be controlled. And this is even sort of part of that coming from that counterspell nature.
Yeah.
Magic is a kind of element of chaos in the natural world and a breaking of the natural order. Counterspell is a kind of ordering and controlling of the world.
Yeah, like, we didn't work this into the backstory of Runetown, but if you wanted to have it be that the source of it was, like, very wild magic driven, that would work really well for Judge Doom and his whole order thing. That all the runes are kind of powered by wild magic.
So that, as I said, we'll loop back to this, that specific act of ultimate darkness, because we have to. The real format demands we do this. We say right in our thing, he can't become Dark Lord by attrition. Is killing Teddy Valley. That he killed a human. A lot of times we have that act of ultimate darkness isn't necessarily the morally worst thing they do, but it's the thing that breaks their own personal code.
Yeah.
And he's going beyond being a counterspell. It's one thing, when he kills a shoe, that's a really horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
And, you could make the moral calculus argument that it was a morally worse thing to do than killing a cop chasing you. But he is expanding his destructive nature to other aspects of the world. That he is a counterspell. When he dissolves the shoe, he's kind of fulfilling his nature. He isn't bad. He was drawn that way. But, this is past that now. No, This is going beyond what he was drawn to do.
Yeah, that this is, he's almost changing himself from a living counterspell to a sphere of annihilation.
Exactly.
Not mechanically, but in his head.
Yes, so he's becoming this sort of pure force of dissolution. That now and we're going to come back to this, he is not just about dissolving magic anymore, ending runes. He is just negation. He is, like you said, almost a fear of annihilation. He is just the dissolution of anything.
Yeah.
Which also, once again, fits that sort of freeway as utopia.
Oh, yeah.
That he loves the idea of bulldozing a vibrant community to build a flat strip of asphalt.
Yeah. It's kind of getting into, your classic, robot, humans cause chaos, so clearly the thing to do is to, kill all the humans.
So that takes care of our active ultimate darkness. And once again, so we do have something we can pull on. It's not clear how this is the worst thing he does, but yeah, good enough for us. Then, as Rachel mentioned, the torment. This was... Ugh. Because that is a man living his best life. That is not
you look at that smile on his face.
He is just... Every day he wakes up happy to be like Judge Doom.
He's gonna go kill more
And he's
Dooms.
I'm living the dream.
Yeah.
Getting paid to do what I love. I'm loving what I'm getting paid to do. And just oh man, if only we could wake up like Judge Doom does on an average day. But we have
things you did not expect to hear when you clicked on this podcast.
But once again, we have to do something.
Yes.
So, there's kind of something we're reaching here. Guys, we know we're reaching here. You don't need to, comment. But there is a fundamental interesting thing with the paradox of being, a rune that hates other runes. Because that's the one, if you're I'm taking the movie, I want to find a torment. The closest thing you'd have was the paradox of a tune that hates other tunes.
Yeah. And we are going to talk about that a bit more, and there is a very juicy Dark Lord in there.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's not Judge Doom.
Yes.
That we are going to talk about a little bit more if you are really drawn to that paradox.
Yes.
And you want to, kind of do an alternate version of him, then there's a lot to dive into there. But if we're just going off the movie...
he does not have angst. He does not have any angst at all in terms of, oh my gosh, I'm a self-loathing member of a minority community kind of deal. Which is, as I read, just cool story, but not this guy. Mm-hmm. He wakes up every day happy to be Judge Doom. And then Youth had a really cool one tying into that counterspell nature, that, shift into being not just a counterspell, but sort of a general living negation.
Yes, because the thing we see with Judge Doom, the thing we see him, again, that we see him getting really passionate about and caring about, is the freeway.
Yes.
And even the, Eddie doesn't get it, and he says, it's because you lack vision. And then he goes rhapsodizing about the freeway, and you just see the joy and the delight. He's just transcendently having this beatific vision of the future.
My God, it will be beautiful.
And
it's
he means it.
Yes, that is not a bit, that is not a thing, that is he is transfixed by the vision of a freeway.
Yes. And the thing is, we realized that, with him being a counterspell, he is a visionary. He wants to create. He wants to make this beautiful ordered world, but he is inherently reactive and destructive. He can't create.
Yes.
It goes against his nature, and he is going to try, and he is going to fail. And so actually having it be him getting foiled at the end of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that was always going to happen, because he's never going to be able to build a freeway. Yeah. And even if he succeeded in bulldozing Toontown, he was never going to be able to build a freeway out of it. We don't get to see his torment happen in the movie because he didn't succeed in bulldozing Toontown, but that's kind of our idea for his torment, is he has all these visions that for him are just these amazing utopias that he wants to bring about and create and, gift to the world, but he will never be able to do it. It's kind of, blah, 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 Neil Gaiman is the worst, but kind of like doing Destruction from Sandman as a villain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That all he can do is destroy, and he loves destroying.
Mm-hmm.
But the torment, the cruel trick of the dark powers, is he dreams of building something.
Yeah.
And he never will.
He never will.
Like something, if not Eddie and Roger, something would have stopped him. Mm-hmm. Maybe your PCs.
Maybe your PCs.
And yeah, so he has these visions of redoing this city, which I'm going to call Langeles for obvious reasons, of redoing this city in his own image, in his own like vision of order. It never worked.
Yeah.
Now, even harder than the torment, as Rachel has mentioned, the element of tragedy and relatability.
Well, as we discussed when we watched this with our kids, the closest cartoon analog we can think of to Roger Rabbit is SpongeBob SquarePants. Yeah. And I think most parents have at some point wanted to dip SpongeBob SquarePants after hearing his laugh.
Yeah, like, oh boy.
It's a real fun show. Man, that laugh.
Yeah, wow. You get enough of that and you're ready to break out the big rubber gloves. And yeah, so like we're reaching here. This is our version. You could dig into the self-loathing. We've touched on that. That's absolutely a juicy character. That's a little, like, too off-book for kind of our canon version.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have any self-loathing. No, he's, like living his best life.
I feel like that's the most interesting direction to take it. And even, like, the fact that we don't see it in the movie in a lot of ways checks out. We have in our outline here specifically for me to take point on this. Because, like, you know, the vast majority of people who meet me assume I'm straight because I'm married to a dude and have 3 kids. And, you know, I'm bi. If this is your first episode, hi, I'm bisexual.
Hello.
But there is something in when you're passing, it becomes, like, so easy to just wake up every day and more become the latex mask and plastic eyes and false teeth. And if you have skin in the game of continuing to pass, like, for instance, you want to judge ship, which presumably is only for humans, then it becomes so easy to, like, hate that part of yourself that is holding you back, you know, to hate being a toon because it's holding you back from getting that judgeship, and to, like, externalize that on all the other toons, because by this point you've almost forgotten that you're a toon, because you wake up every day and you put on the mask and you've forgotten that it's not your actual face, and you're able to externalize it, and you forget that when you're killing all these other toons, it's really because you want to kill the part of yourself that lives under the mask. And there's a lot of really amazing, juicy potential there, and I can actually believe that all of that is going on for Judge Doom, and we don't see it. Because, again, when you learn to become the latex mask of the plastic eyes and the false teeth, you learn to bury it so deep that no one ever does see it. But, again, we don't really see it in the...
I'm not an expert on either Los Angeles history or noir, but one of the wonderful things about Who Framed Roger Rabbit is it's an amazing noir movie. And this is the movie you can use to introduce people to, like, noir, classic noir. And I believe there was the red car, and the, like, buying the red car to drive out of business was a real thing. And I believe there was a demolishing, I think, a Mexican neighborhood to build the freeway. And you absolutely could do an amazing noir with this character who is part Mexican or Mexican, but passes as white and has kind of invented this white identity. Projecting all that, projecting outward all that self-loathing and being like, no, we need to demolish this neighborhood where I'm secretly from.
Yes.
Like, I need to destroy this neighborhood where I was born and raised, because that's that sort of externalizing the internal drama of wanting to destroy that part of themselves.
Exactly, yeah. But again, you could tell by how passionately we're talking about this that this really was interesting.
Yes.
But at the same time, if it's there for Judge Doom, it's so buried in him that we didn't want to go in that direction.
Like, if we were running this in a game, we would probably do that iteration of Judge Doom. But it feels presumptuous to make that the canon Judge Doom. So another potential torment, if you don't want to dig in that element, is the tragedy of this being of pure destruction it wants to create.
Yeah.
And that there's a little bit of this, like, connected to what we see with Monsters University with Mike Wazowski. If you probably weren't expecting us to mention Monsters University or Mike Wazowski.
Judge Doom would dip the heck out of Mike Wazowski.
Yeah, right. Oh, Mike. Yeah. But you need different dip if they're CGI.
That's
you need,
true.
like,
That's true.
a big magnet to kill them.
That giant magnet that he...
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So, that in Monsters University, it's a really interesting thing with Mike Wazowski. He wants to be a scarer. He has this deep passion for scaring. Is his dream, and he just doesn't have what it takes. He does not have that inner talent. He's not scary. Mm-hmm. And so much of the heart of that movie and the dramatic core of that movie and the really gripping part of that movie is that inherent tension of your dreams versus your abilities. Mm-hmm. And that this is the kind of thing. Judge Doom dreams of building a new world, but all he can do is destroy the old world.
Yeah.
And so there is a element of tragedy and relatability. Of being you have all these dreams, but you do not have the capability of accomplishing them. And there you go. That's something.
Yep.
Element of tragedy and relatability. Check. Check that box.
Sure.
That'll do. So
it's still better than Inzakolvich. So.
Yeah. Finally, the one that we don't have to, like, jump through, backflip through hoops to make work. The domain reflecting the Dark Lord's personality or curse. He's a rune. It's a rune town. Now, as we mentioned, the great thing about this movie is that it is just a good noir movie. And this is a good, like, if you were trying to explain a lot of the, like, core story beats and themes of noir, you could go to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Mm-hmm. And, more people have seen that than, like, Kiss Me Deadly or The Maltese Falcon.
I mean, I think we've used Who Framed Roger Rabbit to explain noir movies to our older kids.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we are imagining, a little jumping ahead, but once hopefully, if you saw the movie, you probably guessed this, this being a very noir set.
Yeah.
That, like, you don't just go in here and dungeon crawl and fight Judge Doom at the end in a big cave on a pile of treasure, sitting on a pile of treasure, yes.
Get a singing sword +1.
And it's you do a noir story, speaking of Eberron. And he makes such an amazing noir villain. Like, noir stories are all about corruption, about power and money, and about conspiracies. And he makes a great villain, this idea of the villain that is this sort of spider at the center of the web, which is a phrase I'm going to drive into the ground in this podcast because it is so perfect for, like, what we're imagining for Judge Doom in this setting. He's the spider in the center of the web. He has political power. He has money. He's incredibly morally bankrupt and corrupt. He dreams of reshaping the world in his image. And he can be a villain not just of this specific plan to destroy Toontown and build a freeway, but he could be, you could imagine Judge Doom in any number of conspiracies, like any number of plans spinning out, either to, like, hurt Toons, even just enhance his own money and power.
Yeah.
Like, they did, like, a little prequel story where Judge Doom had some conspiracy to, like, get elected to the city council. You'd be like, yeah, okay, it checks out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He's doing evil, shady, criminal conspiracy stuff to get elected to the city council. You'd be like, yeah. And
that's what Judge Doom does.
So that's why it works. That's how this domain reflects the Dark Lord. So, in taking this amazing villain who we have done our level best to add psychological complexity and relatability to, then how do you reflect this? And normally it's a stat similar to, and it's almost always one of, like, the NPCs from the Monster Manual, but none of those quite work. And this is going to sound really weird.
Hear him out.
Hear me out. Let me finish. So, stat similar to a goblin boss. Let me finish.
I had the same reaction that you're probably having when I first heard this.
And obviously he's not a goblin. We had a whole thing about that in the intro. We're not doing goblins or anything like that. The big thing with a goblin boss that makes him useful as a base stat block for Judge Doom is that he's got decent physical stuff. There's the inherent idea of a boss being a commander. Because, like Judge Doom, he is a good combatant.
Yeah.
Like, he goes toe-to-toe with the heroes. But his real nature is as a commander. He's a boss.
It's ordering the weasels around.
And the goblin boss has nimble escape and redirect attack. And those are such Judge Doom.
Yes.
Such Judge Doom powers.
Especially redirect attack.
That
guy.
If there was a deleted scene where, once again, they, like, threw something, they grabbed a weasel and pulled in front of him, then, like, you'd be like, yep, But even the nimble escape, like, no, he's very slippery.
Yes.
Like, he's a tough combatant, but he is not a, like, stand there and slug it out.
No, there are so many times when he gets away from Eddie when they're slugging it out.
Yeah. So, in terms of special Dark Lord powers, he has unlimited counterspell.
Of course.
Right, like, he can counterspell, all the live long day. Our version of Dip is that he built this magical construct he can carry with him that he can set up. It's not like a fireball blast he can do. He has to, like, set up. It's like a ritual. Mm-hmm. But it's a unique anti-magic field that can kill living spells.
Yeah.
So the whole, like, if you can have the living spell in this kind of, summoning circle type thing that he sets up for the duration of the ritual, then it's dissolved.
And if you wanted to have it be kind of more like a potion where it's an actual dip, then that's fine. It works like an anti-magic field. Mm-hmm. So
he has resistance to physical damage because he is a tune, he is a rune, he is a living spell.
Yeah, we're kind of having that for all of the runes to reflect the fact that you could drop refrigerators on their head all day and they won't feel a thing.
Yep.
So.
And then we have the Rune Patrol, which this was, I think, was also you.
Yes.
This is our version of the Weasels.
The Rune Patrol are living hunter's marks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Yeah. They have a special gift for the work. So, yes, these hunter's mark spells have a special gift for the work of
hunting people down.
Hunting down people and or runes.
Yes.
And then finally, of course, as Dr. Facilier would tell us, the real power in this world isn't magic, it's money.
Buckets of it.
And he has buckets
of simoleons.
He has buckets of it. Like, he has the ultimate superpower a Dark Lord can have, which is a lot of power, money, and influence.
Yes.
He is a judge, he's a very wealthy man, and he is presumably very plugged into the city power. Like, just the fact that he makes this Cloverleaf, he buys the red car, he makes this company, he's able to make all these maneuvers, he has access to the city council plan for the freeway, he's able to bring in Arcade Maroon, who's a very wealthy, important man, he's able to, like, get him enrolled in this plan and kind of use him as a flunky.
Yeah.
So this is a very powerful and influential man. Mm-hmm. And then, with closing the border, we have a kind of freeway type sort of reference thing that we're imagining that, like, there's the city proper, and then there's Runetown. And I think this was you.
Yeah, because this was one where we had to think about it, because there's not really a closing the border in the movie. Mm-hmm. And the closest that we kind of see to any sort of transition from one place to another is when Eddie goes from Los Angeles to Runetown and back. Mm-hmm. And so, what if that's just a loop? When he closes the border, is it like, you try to leave Langeles, and you walk over the border into Runetown, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go through Runetown into the mist, and so you go through Runetown, and then you end up in Langeles. Like, okay, I'm going to go through Langeles into the mist, and you go through Langeles, and you end up in Runetown. So you're just looping constantly, because you can't find your exit.
Yes.
It's DuPont Circle.
Traffic jams are not a thing of the past. So, then we always like to wrap up our Dark Lord discussion with the role-playing trait ideal, bond, and flaw. And we use these with quotes. That's what they do with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. They always give them as quotes of the Dark Lord. We always like to do our very best to find quotes from our character in the movie that we're using. This was trickier because, once again, we're back. We kind of made a new species for him to be and, like, invented a bunch of, like, a lot of this is our invention, motivation, all that sort of stuff. His inherent nature. It's
like the issue we had with Yubaba, where we came up with this whole backstory from her from whole cloth, and we were very proud of that backstory, but it was all us. There was nothing for it in the movie.
And, like, Judge Doom, he's not that much of a dialogue guy. Like, he has, like, mostly very sinister villain dialogue.
Just stands there and looks spooky.
So, this is what we got, and we'll do our best to come up with which of these makes a good role-playing trait, ideal, bond, and flaw for this sort of half Christopher Lloyd in the movie, half our own weird Dungeons & Dragons nerdery version of the character.
It'll still be better than Professor Callahan.
Indeed. That was his mistake. Reigning champ of man of few words.
Yes.
So, vehicle of my own design, 5,000 gallons of heated dip, pumped at enormous velocity through a pressurized water cannon. Toontown will be erased in a matter of minutes. Potential.
Potential.
A few weeks ago, I had the good providence to stumble upon a plan of the city council. Construction plan of epic proportions. We're calling it a freeway. 8 lanes of shimmering cement from here to Pasadena. Smooth, safe, fast. Traffic jams will be a thing of the past. We had to explain to our kids why that was funny.
Yeah. Wow, I forgot that he didn't even come up with the plan for the freeway. It was the city council. Because he's a counterspell. Of course he didn't come up with it.
I think he came up with a plan. Yeah.
Oh, Judge Doom, honey.
Who's got time? No wonder what happened to some ridiculous talking mice when they're driving by at 75 miles an hour.
What are you talking about? There's no road past Toontown.
Of course not. We lack vision, but I see we have to use it. We go on and off the freeway, on and off and on, all day, all night. Soon, while Toontown once stood, will be a string of gas stations, inexpensive motels, restaurants that serve rapidly prepared food, tire salons, automobile dealerships, and wonderful, wonderful billboards reaching as far as the eye can see. My God, it will be beautiful. Gosh, is that gotta be the ideal, like...
Maybe the whole thing.
Or the Bond, or like, this is just, yeah.
We'll see what else you got.
This one thing's useful. What an unfortunate accident. Nothing more treacherous than a slippery road, especially when driving in a maniacal Toon vehicle. I could see that for a role-playing trait being like how they interact with him. Because it is the whole sinister, the sort of lie, the sort of pretending this is something normal. Right. It was an accident when he poured the dip on the road. I'll catch the rabbit, Mr. Valiant. I'll try him, convict him, and execute him.
That's gotta be something, because it's your good old-fashioned, I'm gonna give him a fair trial and then execute him.
Yeah. And I love this one. I gotta have this. They're not kid gloves, Mr. Valiant. This is how we handle things down in Toontown. I think you of all people would appreciate that.
Oh, that's so good.
I think I want that for trait.
Yeah.
Like, because once again, that's how he's approaching Eddie is kind of how he'll be with the PCs.
Yeah, even that he is trying to do a little bit of the we're not so different to it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Don't you want Toons to be dead? And that whole, like, he's playing this as, I'm just a harsh but fair judge.
Yeah.
Perhaps not more cooperative, Mr. Valiant. A human has been murdered by a Toon. Don't you appreciate the magnitude of that?
The chutzpah of this guy. You're the one who murdered him.
You're an idiot! That's why he even could say that you of all people should appreciate that because he knew his brother.
Yeah.
Okay, I almost wrote ideal for this one. Just since I've had Toontown under my jurisdiction, my goal has been to rein in the insanity. And the only way to do that is to make Toons respect the law.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Right, like...
It's not often that a Dark Lord just says something like, I want always to be a little boy and have fun.
Yeah, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they say, my goal has been to rein in the insanity. This is the last one I have. We'll settle with him later. Right now, I feel like dispensing some justice. Bring me some tip. Okay, so we still need a bond and a flaw.
What even is his flaw?
Like, what is the thing, rather than like, there's a moral or character thing, what is the thing that's going to make him trip up? Maybe, I didn't have it here, but it's the scene where in the bar, and Eddie does the like, oh, can he have a last request? Can he have a drink? And Judge Doom says something like, I don't mind delaying the execution. And like, maybe that being the hubris.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
So that I could see for flaw, because once again, that leads him to make a mistake. The sort of, kind of the sadism too, the like, I don't mind delay, I don't mind, if he just executed Roger right then, he could have put him in dip and killed Roger, but he's like, I don't mind, like, stretching it out a little, making him sweat.
Making a bit more of a show, yeah. Like, the only other thing I can think of other than the hubris would be the fact that he's so off-putting, he makes people not want to work with him.
Right.
So even again, I'm thinking of the bar scene and the whole, like, erasing the chalkboard with the guy's face.
Such a jerk.
So, like, I think the positive mind for me for flaw would be a loony selection for a bunch of drunken reprobates, but I don't know if that makes sense out of context. But, like, the fact that he's insulting them and calling them drunken reprobates while trying to get their help.
Right, it's like Roger made them laugh, but that probably didn't help with them turning in Roger, that Judge Doom was being such a jerk to them.
Yeah, but I can't think of a good quote that would...
Yeah, because it's very like the, flaw... Asterix, Judge Doom grabs armless man's sleeve, uses it to erase chalkboard.
Leans on the little person's head, forces him down to be even shorter.
That's much more, and it's great acting, it's great visual movie storytelling, but not useful for our context. Yeah. So you're cool with the...
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind delaying the execution. Okay, so now we have the bond. Is the bond going to be to the freeway?
Wow. If the bond's... I almost see the bond being you lack vision.
Yeah,
because the flip side of that is he has vision.
Yeah. I was thinking like specifically that, like, do I want to do the entire, like, bit? But definitely of course not, you lack vision.
My God, it'll be beautiful.
My God, it will be beautiful.
Yeah, of course not, you lack vision. ... My God, it will be beautiful.
Will be beautiful, yes. You lack vision. I see a place where people get on and off the freeway, on and off all day, all night. My God, it will be... ... My God, it will be beautiful.
Everyone else can remember the entire...
Yeah, right. Like, that's a little silly to have sentence, paragraph for the Bond. But I do specifically want that, like... The genius and the dark humor of this is not like a shining white city of beauty and prosperity. This is a freeway.
This is a freeway.
That is the light that guiding him. Like that is the his utopia, his paradise is a freeway.
Yeah.
He wants to pave paradise in the middle of a parking lot.
He does want to pave paradise in a parking lot.
So, of course not, you lack vision, but I see a place where people get on and off the freeway, on and off and on, all day, all night. My God, it will be beautiful.
Perfect.
Okay, so we have talked about Judge Doom. We have talked about our spider in the center of the web. And now we will talk some about the web that he is the spider in the center of. We will talk about what I'm calling the city of Langeles in a section we like to call...
The Land. The Land. Langeles is divided into two distinct parts. While the mortal area of the city technically comprises many neighborhoods and districts, as one would expect from a metropolis of its size, they have far more in common with one another than with Runetown, where even the streets and buildings are constructed from pure magic. The precise origin of Runetown and its residents is unknown. Some claim that it came from a horrific magical disaster on a distant world, while others believe it was unleashed by experimentation in Haslan, or even dreamed up from whole cloth by Isan the Mad. Whatever its source, Runetown is such a distinctive feature of Langeles that many outsiders consider the two interchangeable, a source of either pride or chagrin to mortal residents, depending on their attitude toward runes. As previously alluded to, there is more to the tension between mortals and runes than runish antics. Runes are sustained entirely by fulfilling their spell function. For instance, a famous Harangon entertainer who embodied Tasha's hideous laughter needed neither food nor sleep in order to survive, only to make others laugh. This means, however, that the living spells I witnessed were far more desirable as employees than mortal laborers. Not only could they work at dizzying heights to create Langeles' breathtaking skyline, for runes have no fear of physical damage, including that from falling, but their employers can pay them a pittance, knowing that the work itself is its own reward. Little wonder that the wealthy of Langeles are able to become ever wealthier, lining their pockets by exploiting rune labor, or that Doom is able to foment anti-rune sentiment among disaffected workers. I spoke to a drunken stonemason who complained at length about the various building projects that living mage hands, stone shapes, and fabricates had taken from him. He let slip, however, that he had recently been offered a year's pay to help take care of a rune construction project, sabotaging it to make sure that it would collapse. He was sure that the rune's handiwork was as erratic as the runes themselves, and if he needed to help things along for people to see that, well, he was just glad to have someone pay him for the privilege of putting the runes out of work, starving them in the process. I had promised to buy the man a drink in exchange for his interview, but I felt no guilt whatsoever at leaving him with the tab. Thankfully, not all of Langeles' citizens see the runes as a threat or a resource, or, in the case of the patrons of the Ink and Parchment Club, a source of titillation. There are those who take pride in the runes and cherish the energy they bring to Langeles. Of these champions, none is so vocal as Marvin Arkme, the eccentric artificer whose inventions include some of the only new runes created since the inception of Runetown. Arkme owns Runetown, and is thus the greatest obstacle between the runes and their enemies. Perhaps it is a sign that my work has made me fatalistic, but I find myself wondering how long he has before Doom makes a more permanent move against him.
So, before we get into the land proper, just one quick note. It is hard for us to judge how relevant this is.
Yes.
But we are both recovering from very nasty colds.
There was a longer break than usual between recording the first section and recording this section.
So if there's a sudden, weird thing in our voices from the Lord to the land, that's it.
We recorded the Lord when I was, between colds, because we waited to record this episode until I was over my first cold.
Suckers.
Yeah, and I wish that we hadn't done that because, number one, that we could have been done with this before we both got the really bad cold. And number two, the first cold was my Jessica Rabbit. So it would have been very thematically appropriate. Yes. But this isn't going to be our ASMR episode, so...
So, that's, if we sound weird, that's why. Sorry about that. And it's a little surreal to us to understand that for you, like, a second's going to go by. For us, it's like 2 weeks going by.
Yeah.
But without further ado, the land. So, the domain write-up is going to say Runetown, because I want to communicate what this is a version of. But obviously, I can't call, like, the whole thing Runetown. That's a particular region of the city that is the domain that Judge Doom is the Dark Lord of. So, and I'm kind of embarrassed by how proud I am of this, I'm calling it the city of Langeles. Yeah, get it? Get it?
Yeah!
So, Langeles, it's one of those really useful things. It's not a whole country because we seem to be incredibly adverse to doing any kind of larger scale domains. Maybe just because those are like, there are not a lot of Disney movies that have that kind of scale.
Yeah.
So most Disney movies are much more focused in.
Like, even if you get the impression that there is a wider country, it's very focused in on a single poor provincial town or
an island or something. Yeah. So this is a very, very, very big city where that gives us a ton of narrative options, which is always nice to have. You know, we got more narrative options here than we do in the village of Encanto or the city of Roses or anything like that.
Good Lord, we got more than the city of Roses.
And even just as kind of we did with Snow White, we have that wonderful real world analog you can always go back to whenever you're trying to flesh this out, of sort of post-war, late 1940s Los Angeles. And anything you want to look up, any buildings, any specific details, there's an Art Deco observatory on a hill outside of town, you can go to post-war Los Angeles. We're imagining it's a major port, it's a major center of the arts, it's a really booming metropolis, like, you know, you have a lot of people moving in for work, and the ruins can be a part of that. The ruins are really revolutionizing how productive the city can be, how much magical stuff they can produce. You've got a kind of the equivalent of all these new technologies coming out of the war stuff. You've got that with like new magical stuff coming out of these living spells. So it's a big sort of steampunky, magitech-y equivalent of 1940s Los Angeles.
If you're hearing steampunk, magitech, post-war, living spells, you know Tom is just vibrating, waiting for that Ephron minute. But we're not there yet. Yeah!
So, the big unique thing that gives us our name on the write-up, that gives us our sort of main domain name we're using, that gives us a particular neighborhood, is Runetown. Woo! That Runetown is this particular neighborhood. Maybe it's the neighborhood where the first kind of like magical thing happened that made them come to life, and they decided to live there. And like, there are maybe some runes that live in other parts of the city, but this is their community. This is where they prefer to live. This is kind of where they're happy and where they're not second-class citizens. They're not looked down upon, where they can be comfortable. It's not going to be the crazy, like, cartoon logic driving. If you paint a tunnel, you can drive through the tunnel, unless you're chasing someone through a tunnel, in which case you just hit the wall. But it is like crazy magic. Just everything is magic. Everything is living spells. Everything is powered by living spells. You've got all sorts of crazy magic stuff there.
Tom was looking at me because I just made my thinking face, because he mentioned the thing that whatever event created the living spells. And if you wanted to, you could have it be something that there were these two wizards, Charles Jones and Walter Disney. And
the rivalry created.
Yes. And of course Arcane Maroon.
Arcane Maroon. Speaking of the runes, we've talked a bit about kind of how we're imagining them in terms of rules text. Now, in this society, they're treated by what we're going to call mortals. We can't say humans because it's a D&D setting, but we have mortals and runes. Because for a long time, most people thought runes were in fact immortal, but Judge Doom proved that isn't quite true, but mortals and runes.
Remember how you always said you couldn't kill a rune?
He found a way. That they are a source of great prosperity, but they're treated as second-class citizen, and there is some tension with misplaced mortal workers. That you legitimately have, like, a create food and water spell can take the place of a whole mortal kitchen staff and make stuff that is just going to be faster and more efficient, and that's going to cause a level of tension.
And Hero's Feast is going to be making stuff that's faster, more efficient, and better. So.
That's your finest restaurants in Langeles will have living Hero's Feasts in the kitchen. So, as we mentioned, one of the things, this could be a fun thing in terms of a lot of Easter eggs, or even just coming up with fun runes of your own, is that runes are driven to fulfill their function. So that Roger Rabbit, as Rachel came up with, is a hideous laughter spell, though he's a funny hideous laughter spell.
He's a joyous laughter spell.
Jessica Rabbit we're imagining as a charmed person. Benny the Cab is a fine steed. The Weasels are Hunter's Mark.
You can have lots of fun. If you're a big fan of old cartoons, or even just want to put in a bunch of cartoon Easter eggs in general, go nuts here. Like, Felix the Cat is a bag of many things. Or
even, like, coming up with the... how many entertainers are there going to be?
Yeah.
But stuff like, Hero's Feast is a gourmet chef. Create Food and Water is like your diner chef. I mean, Unseen Servant is whatever kind of domestic you need. Mending is the cobbler, the tailor, all your finest tailor shops will have a living mending, working in the back, doing the actual work. And practicality, something like Tensor's floating disc makes an amazing, like, truck. That is there to carry heavy things quickly and efficiently.
Yeah.
And so on. And so on. And so on. This also could be fun if you really, like, know a lot of D&D spells. To sit down and think, how would a living version of this spell benefit the economy?
Like, how do you get an economic benefit out of Crown of Madness?
Yes,
what is that guy going to be doing for a living? Possibly Daffy Duck?
Possibly Daffy Duck, yeah. Possibly just trying to drive people, being as annoying as possible to drive people crazy. Possibly being a really kind of horrific kind of muscle that a gangster could hire to mess with people. We've touched on some of the potential rules text. And as we mentioned, that sort of drive to fulfill their function, that gives them an economy. And one of the big points of tension in the city is the role the runes are playing in the economy, and that's really what we see in Roger Rabbit. So I think that's really critical, that they are part of this economy and society. And we're imagining that kind of the more they do their function, or if they absorb magical energy, they can, like, raise in spell level.
Yeah.
So, Roger Rabbit might have originally been a 3rd level Tasha's Hideous Laughter, but now he's like a 6th or 7th level Tasha's Hideous Laughter because he's such a successful entertainer. And if they don't do their function, or if they use a lot of their magic energy, then they can reduce in level.
Yeah. Like, as their spell level starts going down, they're just not on top of their game. They can't make stars. No matter how you try, they can't make stars.
And that eventually, if they get down to kind of cantrip level, they basically become, like, really intelligent animals. Like the shoes we see them. The shoes you get, these are not, like, talking, thinking people like Roger or Jessica or Benny the Cat. These are these more, like, primitive, more sort of instinctual creatures.
Or even, like, the bullets in Eddie's gun, like, they have an intelligence, but they're not like Roger and Jessica and Benny level.
That they were, like, happy to just sleep in his gun case for many potential years.
Yeah, like, if the shoes have been taken out of cantrips, then the bullets are, like, level 1.
Yeah. So that gives you even then, once again, sort of a thing that drives the living spells to... You had a thoughtful face.
Oh my gosh, I just realized with the bullets, there's the dum-dums, he shoots them at Judge Doom, and then they get confused and they can't fight him, and he with that away and they zip off. It's because he's a living counterspell. He counterspells them.
So, that gives you that sort of, okay, why did Roger Rabbit care about a paycheck? Like, why is he working? This sort of gives you, there's something they need, there's something they want, there's something that makes them more sort of powerful and competent and capable, and if an unfulfilled need that makes them less powerful and competent and capable. Yeah. So that's kind of any justification you need to incorporate them into the economy.
And even it's kind of like they were able to say that R.K. Maroon made Jessica pose for those pictures because otherwise Roger would never work again.
Exactly.
Roger didn't need to work for the money, but that got him so many laughs.
Right,
that really,
it was like sustenance.
Yeah, and that if R.K. Maroon made it so he never worked again, then he would basically be starving in the street. Like, working on the corner for chuckles.
Doing puns for nickels.
Yes.
And as we've mentioned, the wonderful thing with Roger Rabbit, why it's so good for our purposes, is it doesn't just give you like a cool setting, it gives you specifically a kind of genre of story. So any like questions you have about the setting, any details you need to fill in the setting, you have something to build off of, which is it's a noir city. Much like many of the movies about 1940s Los Angeles, it's a noir city. So it's a city of corruption, it's a city of conspiracy, and a lot, for our purposes, of those corruptions and conspiracies are going to revolve around the runes and Runetown.
Yeah.
So you have as much city stuff as you want to fill in, whatever kind of like thing you need for your noir mystery. If you're like, I need a hall of records for my PCs to go to the hall of records and look over stuff, you're good, you're fine. Whatever you need to fill in. We do have a couple of specific places we want to put in here. Some of them are obviously from the movie, and some are just things I think will be helpful.
So, kind of the first place we see in Roger Rabbit that we can talk about here is, in Roger Rabbit, it's the Ink and Paint Club, here because they're living spells. It's just referencing scrolls, so it's the Ink and Parchment Club.
Pause for laughter.
It's a rune review, but it's got mortal customers, so it's kind of that, like, forbidden fruit, the slumming, the novelty, the, all of that good stuff. Mm-hmm. It's private, there's a password.
Right,
so,
yeah, Walt sent me.
Yeah, Walt sent me, so you could even say that there is, like, either a very upscale or a very seedy underworld or both clientele.
Yeah.
Like, you could do some really interesting stuff with shady underworld figures meeting at the Ink and Parchment Club if you wanted to.
Like, it was interesting 'cause it was like this, like, just warehouse kind of thing in an alley, but everybody's in, like, tuxes and jewelry, and, like, it seems like a super high-class establishment, and just the juxtaposition of those things and the fact that there's a password, like, tells you a lot about this society.
Yeah.
And what kind of place this is.
Yeah, like, getting into aging up, there's, you get, this is some real forbidden fruit. This is some eyes wide shut. Your kids won't know what that is. It's okay. Mm-hmm. It can be a meeting place for all sorts of dirty deals, and again, a potential vice center. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of weirdness going on here. We mentioned Rune Town just kind of like as a place where the runes are. But one fun thing with Rune Town is that there's going to be wild magic happening constantly. Like, this is just, like, the living spells are sort of living embodiments of wild magic, and you can totally, like, see the Eddie getting slammed down into the elevator and turning into a pancake as being, like, a wild magic effect.
We said the holder wouldn't be all the crazy cartoon logic, because that's not like a cartoon dimension.
Yeah.
But you can get some of that with just constant wild magic searches.
Yes.
So this is one of those things. I know sometimes if DMs want to get real bonkers, they might do something like every time someone uses a spell or magic item, you roll on the wild magic table. And I would maybe do that in a Rune Town.
Yes.
If you go in a Rune Town, every time you use magic in any form, you roll on the wild magic table.
Yes, absolutely. And that also counts for the living spells doing their living spell things and getting spell effects. It's constantly going off. And I think there could be, like, a lot of fun here with getting into kind of the cartoon logic of what happens at the Wild Magic table. I kind of wish we were doing this episode after we do our Emperor's New Groove episode, whatever that's going to be, because one of the things we're trying to crack with that is how to do a Looney Tunes Ravenloft domain. So, in the future, when Emperor's New Groove comes out, come back and listen to this again with fresh ears.
Yes, indeed. Those are both from the movie. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the movie doesn't have a lot of, like, locations.
No, it's kind of
very
those
focused story.
Maroon Studios.
And Eddie's office and the bar. Mm-hmm. But for a wider field of noir stories, there's kind of two I wanted to put in. And one is what I'm calling Platinum Hills. And this is, I'm like, all right, it's noir. There have to be mansions. There have to be fancy parties where the detective can come in and have arch dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
With, like, the host, and where everyone's being faux polite to each other.
Femme fatales are slinking around.
Right, yeah. And so I like to look up what's the fancy part of LA, because we're basing this on. Once again, this is that great having a real city we're drawing from. I can just look it up. And it's, like, apparently called, I think, the Golden Triangle, where it's, like, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, and one other neighborhood. And that's, Mansionland.
Yeah.
Like in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You've seen that house.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm calling it Platinum Hills.
That's where they give out king-size candy bars to trick-or-treaters.
I'm sure they do. So that is the uptown. That is the rich mortal district. We're imagining kind of playing on that class thing a little bit. There are lots of runes there, but only as servants. And that this is like mortals only. And we are imagining Judge Doom lives there. There's the Doom estate. Because Judge Doom has a mansion.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we never see anything but the car, the Toon Patrol, like, truck. But he has a mansion.
I mean, he's still a zillion simoleons.
A zillion simoleons, yeah. And then we have this concept of Roger Rabbit as performing as a laughter spell, doing comedy, trying to get that laughter. So we're imagining there is a famous theater district in Langeles called Burbank. And that's this art entertainment district. And that's another area that really heavily features runes. And it might be you do have some displaced actors or comedians that are a little grumpy, but I could also see that being an area where there's a lot of, like, harmony. Was a lot of, like, mortals and runes working together to make the best show. Because, you know, you could have, like, a living color spray.
Ooh, yeah.
That just does special effects.
Uh-huh.
That does pyrotechnics for shows. And this is one where having living spells working with the mortals is going to produce the best possible show.
And the great thing is there are going to be people with various opinions on this. So, because one of the things that really helps a world feel lived in is if there are, like, you know, it's not like all the tolerant actors feel this way and all the bad actors feel this way. It's like, well, no, they're going to be some who are like, yes, this is absolutely the best thing. We're making the best shows together, and it's awesome. And then there are going to be others who say, yes, that's great, as long as they know that their place is behind the scenes, not in front of the stage. And then there are going to be others who love the idea of a toon lead in theory, but they're never actually going to cast one.
So, finally, to revisit one more place we actually do see that we forgot on our list of locations.
Yes.
And that's Arkemy Industries, headed by Marvin Arkemy, who we are imagining is an artificer who creates magical items. He employs many, many, many runes, and he's become this incredibly wealthy man because he's been able to make all these amazing magic items and, like, streamline production, speed up production. We are imagining he's such a, like, child, which kind of, like, endearingly childlike. And we're imagining the version of this is he's just this, like, huge magic nerd. He's not, like, a cold, ruthless capitalist. He just is this huge magic nerd who stumbled on a financial empire. And also we're imagining he's, like, in the halls of power, he's their best friend. He's the one who's most likely to sympathize with them, speak for them, argue they be treated with respect. In those fancy parties, he's going to be the one arguing that runes should be treated better. And he's really one of their only allies in the kind of city power structure.
Yeah. And another thing with Marvin Arkemy is that those magic items that he's created, he's actually able to make new runes. And the only ones that we see in the movie are cantrip level. Like, he has a very weak ability to create new runes. Maybe some of them are going to learn how to empower themselves and, you know, go up in level. And boy, howdy, no wonder Doom wants him dead if that's the case. But we do see all of those creations that he makes are toon creations, not like physical objects.
And those shoes are really, like, helping us with this world building. Not just a way to show how horrible Judge Doom is. And finally, of course, he owns Runetown.
Yes.
Like, he owns the land. Like, that Runetown is built on.
He is the land?
He is the land.
No, Judge Doom is the land.
But he owns the land. So you have all sorts of potential murder mysteries, conspiracies, legal manipulations, all that stuff that makes a great noir mystery. Let's talk about what kind of noir mystery your players might come into and what might bring them to this city of noir mystery. Rachel, what do you do with it?
Dread possibilities. It was when I visited Runetown itself that my survey of the domain took a dark turn. I immediately noticed a familiar quality to the brilliant colors and vibrant sounds of Runetown. Because they were made from pure magic, they should have been unlike anything I had ever seen or heard before, except that I knew I had seen and heard them, and recently. This nagged at the back of my mind as I endured various indignities inherent to visiting Runetown. Brick walls concealed behind illusions of roads, a blast of heat that briefly dissolved me into a puddle before allowing me to reform again, as well as certain surprising pleasures, such as the aroma from the Hero's Feast bakery, which was so delicious that it caused me to float in midair. Trying to get information from most of the runes was an exercise in futility. I can think of few spells whose purpose is to answer questions. And while I was excited to study the magical properties of Runetown, it proved to be less enlightening than I had hoped. There were near constant surges of wild magic whenever I tried to cast a spell or invocation, something that apparently affected all non-rune casters in Runetown, and other unpredictable magical effects at almost every turn, but observing a living spell was similar to observing the same spell as it was cast. As I left Runetown in disappointment, a tiny rain cloud floating over my head, I had the sense of being watched. The air around me grew darker and colder, the malleable nature of Runetown warning me of danger. I cast invisibility to conceal myself from whoever was following me, but the magical energy dissipated the moment I pulled it to myself. As I turned about with eldritch sight, trying to see what was interfering with my spellcasting, a crossbow bolt flew through the space where my head had been a moment before. I whipped around, aiming an eldritch blast toward the place where the crossbow bolt had appeared, at Judge Doom, crouching in the shadows with a crossbow. Even as I wondered why Doom would be attacking me, I remembered the conversation with the loose-lipped stonemason, a man who undoubtedly had a crossbow bolt in his own back right now. Two things happened simultaneously. My eldritch blast fizzled and died, and Judge Doom shimmered with abjuration magic. He was countering my spells, but without using any somatic components. Either Doom knew how to cast spells without movement, or Doom himself was the spell. I could not outrun a madman's crossbow bolt, and I could only think of one useful spell that I could manage before he had time to work another counterspell. I cast Misty Step, vanishing just as another bolt penetrated the place where my heart had been. Wild magic surged again, and it seemed that the magic itself desired to protect me from Judge Doom, for it formed a shield around me as I ran. This time, I recognized in it the color I had seen in Runetown. A color that was not a color. It followed me until I was in a brighter, warmer, and safer neighborhood of Runetown, then vanished.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell.
So why did you come to this city of fedoras and dames and tough guys and sinister businessmen with fake politeness who are going to try and have you murdered?
Well, part of it is just, it's Langeles, it's Los Angeles, it's a big city.
Right.
There's kind of the same reason you would go to Mardi Gras in our Crescent City.
Right, exactly. Like, the great thing is, many people just on the planet Earth go to Los Angeles for all sorts of reasons.
Mm-hmm. Especially mini bards who want to make it big.
Right, yeah.
The thing with the Los Angeles, like, as it exists on Earth, it's not a hotbed for wild living magic and crazy artificer innovations. So
right. That's part of why we love having this sort of bustling, on the grow, on the move city, is it gives you so many reasons for people to come there. And it could be bards, it could even just be some of your more arcane-focused PCs are like, hey, I hear there's crazy magic stuff there. Mm-hmm. This is the place to go for any magic stuff. This is the most advanced magic studies, most advanced magic items, unique magic items. Or, once again, it could just be trade caravans! Trade caravans! And speaking of trade caravans, having this be the noir domain lets you structure that story. And much like in Roger Rabbit, and much like in many classic noir stories, it always starts with like a simple job. And so that could be the thing that brings you.
Yeah.
It could be just you're hired to help a trade caravan come to Langeles, and then somehow you get pulled in. Like Eddie Valiant, you get pulled into this wider conspiracy, this wider case.
Yeah, like PCs escorting a trade caravan is kind of like the workaday, pays the bills equivalent of PIs investigating infidelity.
Yes. And it could be that same thing of like the trade caravan, and then the caravan master's murdered, and then they're interrogating you, and you discover all these weird things going on with the trade caravan, and just get pulled classic noir PI style into this wider conspiracy.
Or the trade caravan had something planted on it to make it look like they were smuggling.
There you go.
Or maybe they actually were smuggling, and then you find that out. Trade caravans have lots of potential for being seedy.
And the nice thing is, like with the whole Eddie Valiant story, you might have your super proactive PCs who are like, wait, a weird thing's happening, let's go! Mm-hmm. But the noir structure, the idea is, no, like, even if they're your Eddie Valiant, they just want to, like, get their paycheck and drink, which is quite possible for some PCs.
Yeah.
They're gonna get pulled in. So I know you're involved. You're a suspect. Or even just you're a person of interest in this case. So it's sort of like, well, I've got to get involved. I've got to figure out what's going on because I don't want to be blamed for what's going on. To transition then into the kind of story you have there, once again, we have a very focused plot arc.
Yes.
And that is that noir. You start with a simple case. You get pulled in the wider conspiracy. Maybe you're being blamed. Maybe you're being framed. Maybe you're the patsies. PCs would make great patsies.
PCs would make great
heavily
patsies.
armed transients.
Yeah.
With probably a rap sheet of at least... I mean, what PC group doesn't at least have a couple of misdemeanors to their name?
Yeah. The paladin is shaking his head and very disappointed in you that this has all come back to haunt you.
And the big thing we're adding onto that for this specific noir setting is whatever conspiracy the PCs get tangled in, Judge Doom is at the center. Mm-hmm. Like, he's the guy. He is the one who is the, get ready to take a drink, spider at the center of the web. Like, whatever the conspiracy is, it's something Judge Doom is doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give you in the write-up, I looked at some, like, L.A. noir movies and some L.A. noir stories, and I'm going to give you, like, a chart of potential conspiracies.
Yeah.
Also, for a full Roger Rabbit, it should also involve either the Toons or Toontown.
Yes, absolutely.
So there are a lot of classic L.A. noir movies. They're about sort of land, controlling land, buying land. And in my examples, it's always Toontown.
Yeah, like...
It's always like, wants to do something with Toontown.
Why would you play in the Roger Rabbit domain if you weren't going to use Toontown? Like, you can do noir stories anywhere.
Yeah. And another, for a classic noir, you might want to have your femme fatale. We have one of the great femme fatales of animation in this movie. We have Jessica Rabbit. One of the things I think that's brilliant about this movie as a noir is the flip of the femme fatale.
Yes.
That Jessica Rabbit is a loving, devoted wife who really just wants the best for her husband.
She is Betty Crocker.
Yes.
She's not Poison.
So that could be, once again, a kind of fun flip to have. Mm-hmm. Or you could do the double flip fake out of, no, just this version of Jessica Rabbit's actually just your traditional toxic mercenary. Poison, not Betty Crocker.
Or, if you wanted to preserve, because Roger and Jessica are so wholesome and I love them.
Goals.
So... if you're like, no, I don't want to touch Roger and Jessica.
Yeah.
I love them too much, but I do want to surprise my PCs because they're not going to be surprised that Jessica Rabbit is a good person. You can always bring in a new femme fatale. That's the great thing.
Especially if you're kind of pitching her as the Jessica Rabbit of this story, then you might be able to pull off the plot twist.
Yeah.
Your PCs think they know what you're doing, what you're actually doing, and then no, she's just terrible.
Yeah. And I remember, like, you read something, I'm sure there are really good queer noirs out there. Mm-hmm. I remember you read a queer noir and were extremely disappointed that they didn't do more with a homme fatale.
I
think I'm pronouncing it. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce French.
We've well established. Yes. That's on your bingo cards as we butcher French. You could add that.
But you could have a homme fatale or an NB fatale into, like...
a very, also, I think, kind of underrated... This is such real weird generational touchstone. I think an underrated femme fatale flip around is actually the movie The Mask. Because there's I think it's Cameron Diaz. Right. Cameron Diaz is the, like, sexy night blonde nightclub singer. Mm-hmm. And then there's also, like, the kind of sweet, more conservatively dressed reporter character.
Oh, yeah!
And it's like, obviously she's being, like, presented as the nice girl. Mm-hmm. But then the flip around is she's actually a mercenary who sells him out.
Yeah.
Because she wants to, like, get a promotion. And
she wants money because she can't afford her contract.
Right, she can't afford her. Yeah. And Cameron Diaz is a, like, perfectly lovely, like, great girl.
Yeah.
So that could be another thing where you even pitch the, like, the bad girl and the nice girl, and then, surprise!
Speaking of living cartoons, The Mask.
Yeah, speaking of living cartoons. It is more appropriate. So, this is a wonderful setting, and not only a wonderful setting, because a lot of these movies are wonderful settings, it's a wonderful, clear, easily usable, and adaptable narrative structure.
Yes.
And let's talk about some variants of that narrative structure in our Dread Possibilities section, which is going to include an Eberron Minute in a minute.
It is.
The first thing, however, before we talk about Eberron Minutes, we always do is the aging down and aging up. How to do this with younger players who have cool parents who showed them the movies they loved when they were kids and maybe forgot exactly how disturbing some of those things were.
Yeah, or how suggestive and racy some of them were. Yeah.
We always start with aging down. You've got cool kids and good luck. I said here, good luck.
Yeah.
Like, this is, as we've talked about, barely a kid's movie.
Like, Tom and I are Gen X millennial cuspers, so we saw this when we were very young. We didn't let our kids watch it until they were, like, double-digit age.
Yeah. We did not make our parents' mistake of thinking it's got a silly cartoon rabbit.
Oh, man.
So this must be fine for a 7-year-old.
I had nightmares about Judge Doom at the end, and then, okay, I'm really going to be, like, pinpointing my exact age here, but the Viewmaster. They had the Viewmaster disc, which made things look 3D, and they had his sassafras and buzzsaw hand in the Viewmaster coming straight toward your eyeballs in 3D. He's gonna kill you. He's gonna kill you personally. 8-year-old Rachel, you're gonna be dead from Judge Doom's buzzsaw. Yeah.
And I'm just going to say Jessica Rabbit. So, but if you have cool kids and you want to do this for them, like we have to, it's our job, we have to do something. And it's not going to be the full Roger Rabbit experience, because we mentioned the full Roger Rabbit is barely a kid's movie.
Yeah.
So, first off, Runes as full cartoons, really emphasizing the silliness, not digging into the race and class subtext.
No.
Maybe not having Jessica Rabbit be Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah, I think you could just have her be pretty. The joke is that Roger Rabbit's wife is he's a rabbit, honestly, his wife is a really pretty lady.
If you're describing an NPC and you're just describing Jessica Rabbit, like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And this is not a kid's game. This is just describing her as a physical entity. You're not doing a kid's game.
I've played in that game, actually, and yes, no, what's wrong with him? Yes, okay, go on.
Judge Doom is also tricky. You can have him be horrific, but maybe don't have him full-on murder a shoe. This is a great way to introduce noir. Like, this is a great mystery structure, and if you're like, I really kind of want to have a sort of noirish type mystery, having this whole living spells, super cartoony living spells might be a good way to do that in a more kid-friendly way, as Roger Rabbit did. Introduce noir to a generation of 9-year-olds.
Yeah, it was baby's first noir for both of us.
And one change, though, which also Roger Rabbit, that they get the more significant one. Like, the trickiest thing here is that sort of Dark Lord plot armor, and you want to give them, like, a really serious win against Judge Doom.
Yeah.
They can't full-on crush him with a steamroller and spray him with dip and end him forever, but they could save Toontown.
Yes.
And so this is going to be a more optimistic ending than most noir, in terms of, a lot of noir does end with the villain plan thwarted on some level or some kind of justice, but you're going to want a more, like, comprehensive win.
And even, like, with the curse that we've built in for Judge Doom, it's almost going to have to involve foiling his plans, because, again, he can't create. So whatever it is that he's trying to build, you're going to stop him from building that thing. Like, we're kind of seeing saving Toontown as being an extension of his curse, because even if he were able to bulldoze Toontown, then he wouldn't be able to build anything on top of it anyway. So why let him bulldoze Toontown? It's more funny for the Dark Powers if it's still there.
While it is going to be very challenging to do a Roger Rabbit-esque story for younger kid players, I feel like it's not going to be challenging to do it for a table of adult players who had nightmares about the Viewmaster of Judge Doom's buzzsaw hand.
Fellow children of the early 80s, you remember. You remember.
So we didn't really need a skip-ahead warning for Christmas Carol, but I feel like we're going to.
We sure do for this one, especially with the thing that I just added in.
Yes.
So...
We'll say it after the skip-ahead warning.
Yep. So, Future Rachel is going to be coming in with a more detailed content warning for all the various kinds of noir vice we're going to be discussing now. Hello, dear listeners. A discussion of sensual body horror in which we explicitly evoke Clive Barker ensues. No, I am not kidding. Words that rhyme with flex and neurotic are mentioned. And there's also some discussion of the recreational, mind-altering applications of certain spells. If you don't want to listen to that, then you're going to want to jump forward about 8 minutes. The exact timestamp is in the show notes.
Boop! Jessica Rabbit.
Betty Boop.
Betty Boop! Yeah. So Rachel just, like, a minute ago scrolled down to the aging up section and wrote in parentheses, sexy Betty Boop. So I'm as excited as you are to hear what the context of sexy Betty, other than just an observation about Betty Boop's sexiness.
Like, that's just Betty Boop.
You just want to say.
Yeah.
Just, like, let the record show.
Yeah, so we'll get to sexy Betty Boop in a minute.
So yeah, aging up.
Yeah, aging up. So, as always, the opposite.
This section is much, much longer in the outline
than
the aging down. It is 3 times longer than the aging down section.
So, as usual, aging up is the opposite of aging down. Do the opposite. Make Judge Doom as terrifying as we Zennials remember him being.
Buzzsaw hand right to the face.
Buzzsaw hand right to the face. Just like, he actually cuts people with buzzsaw hand, murdering shoes left and right, murdering humans in gory ways that we couldn't see in the movie because it was still rated PG somehow.
Good lord.
Somehow.
The 80s, wild. We've made this several times. Things have come up, and our response to our children has been, the 80s were wild.
You can really play up those race and class parallels more. Once again, kind of doing the opposite of the aging down. Like, getting into this whole idea of runes doing menial labor, runes taking jobs. Like, they're doing the scut work no one wants, yet everyone is still jealous of them, then that could lead to some interesting stuff about immigration if you want to go there. It could lead to some interesting stuff about class if you want to go there. Just there's a lot of interesting things you could dive into with some parallels with the ruins if you wanted to do that.
And the neat thing is, it's like a social discussion, but it's one that's very unique to a kind of D&D setting.
Yes.
So, like, this isn't just like, let's take elves and make them black people. This is like, no, this is a really interesting, unique social problem, social concern that's only happening in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, but that speaks and touches on a number of real-world issues.
Yeah, that, like, they have to do this job, and they just happen to be able to do it better than humans do. Okay, so here's where we get into the real age stuff.
Here I go.
All right. The Vice aspect. So, Vice is a critical part of noir. She's my daughter and my sister. But it's tricky if you want to have that Roger Rabbit tone.
Yes.
Because part of what makes it Roger Rabbit is that it's the humor of there's these seedy noir settings with, what is it, a tale of sex, murder, and blackmail. But it's not sex, they're playing patty cake.
Yeah, like, we showed this to our 13-year-old son, and he was a little scandalized. But then, when they showed the pictures of them playing patty cake...
Like, actually playing patty cake.
Jaw down, and then laughed so hard.
I think he might have literally fallen off the couch.
Yes, it was so funny that they're actually playing patty cake.
And if you have them having sex, then it's not as funny
right, yeah.
anymore.
That's a less good story.
Yeah. So if you want it to be a truly Roger Rabbit qua Roger Rabbit story, then you have to be kind of careful with bringing in these Vice elements. And that is where Sexy Betty Boop comes in. All right. I know I've never mentioned it in the podcast. I don't think I've ever mentioned it in the Discord either. But listeners, one of my guilty pleasures is this goofy anthology series called Hot Blood that are these, like, erotic horror stories, and some of them are good, and most of them are ridiculous. But they're usually all entertaining.
Mark off, Rachel is low-key thirsty in the bingo card.
Yep. Sidebar, I desperately want to have, like, an adult-only podcast where I talk about these books sometime because they are so ridiculous, but at the same time so fascinating, because they tell you so much about people that anyone would find some of these interesting.
Hit us up on Patreon.
Yeah, if you want Book Club of Dread, Rachel does Hot Blood.
Hot Blood.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Rachel tells a very increasingly bemused Tom about the premise of Hot Blood stories.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But one of them was, like, literally someone's erotic horror Roger Rabbit fanfic.
A little preview of the potential series if you hit us up on Patreon.
Yeah. That featured Betty Boop. And they couldn't say it was Betty Boop because she wasn't public domain yet. By the time this episode drops, she might be. But they could just say that she was, like, the sexy black and white.
The Betty
suit.
Boop.
Yes.
The Betty who's boop.
Yes, the Betty who you boop.
Betty who boops.
And so she was a sexy black and white tune. And, like, it was the guy is so excited because he finally gets to get with Betty Boop. But, like, she's a toon, and she's completely alien, and what even gives her pleasure? And so it turned into this weird, like, cosmic horror, body horror, like, the ink is shifting and changing and doing horrible things to him. But there even is this, like, once you go toon, you never go back. Because it's like, this is the worst thing he's ever experienced, but he's never going to experience it again with a human, and he kind of loved it, because it's so new. Like, it's like Toons' Cenobites.
Okay, alright, like, I'm listening.
Yeah. It's like, you could do, you could kind of be, like, fitting the Roger Rabbit tone with that if you went the opposite direction and was like, no, it's not patty cake, they just do the most gonzo stuff.
Right, yeah. You're having sex with a spell.
It's like, what does that even look like? Obviously, Session Zero. Like, I feel like I don't, like, but there could be, if you have a party who's into this kind of, like, weird body horror, cosmic horror, sex horror stuff, and maybe I'm the only person who has that party.
Start with asking, so like Hellraiser, what do we all think? Like, how do we all feel about those movies? Jessica and then go from there, like build off that.
Jessica Rabbit has such sights to show you. And even not getting into that.
To transition to a probably more what you were expecting.
Yes.
You probably were expecting Cenobites to be invoked.
Yeah, I'm sorry, listeners. Like, as we were recording, I remembered this story, and I was like, if I don't mention it now, when can I ever mention it?
In what context will you mention Sexy Betty Boop Cthulhu? Boop Cthulhu.
You could get some really interesting stuff with the R-rated applications of certain spells. Mm-hmm. Like, not even the sexual aspect, but there are some of those spells you could use for drugs. Like,
I mean, that could be Crown of Madness. Crown of Madness could be just your tripping balls, yeah.
Yeah, your hallucinogen, yeah. So, you could get into some very interesting adult-oriented stuff with that.
Or, I mean, hypnotic pattern basically is like...
Yeah, that's
you are just drooling and looking at the pretty colors.
I've had an edible that's hypnotic pattern.
And you can just look like hypnotic pattern. You pay hypnotic pattern, and he, she, it just like zaps you, and you're just like...
We both read Medusa's Web by Tim Powell.
Yeah.
So that had, like... There was a moment of, like, self-annihilation as the drug. And I don't know what spell that would be, but that's totally a spell.
It could be hypnotic pattern.
It could be hypnotic pattern, yeah. It's what you're going for is the self-annihilation. Getting more into that femme fatale, like that we were talking about earlier, it's a major archetype, but since everyone knows Jessica Rabbit is good, you lose some of that whose side is she on thing. So, your goal for a femme fatale is going to be to make an NPC your PCs are drawn to. And in Jessica Rabbit's case, it's the Hubba Hubba that they're drawn to.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. Like, it could be, Tom has discovered that the secret to my heart is to make the whoobiest NPC he can possibly whoobie.
Just the saddest little wide-eyed, pathetic little dude.
Yeah. So if Tom were to make a femme fatale for me, it wouldn't be because I was attracted to her. It would be because I felt so bad for her and I wanted to help
wrap her in a blanket and give her a cup of tea.
And while I was wrapping her in a blanket and giving her a cup of tea, she would shank me and take my wallet.
Yeah.
And then a critical thing with them, it's not even the whose side are they on, it's the fact that they're not on anyone's side. It's the fact that they have their own agenda and their twists and turns with their loyalty. So, like, with Jessica Rabbit, she's not on Eddie's side, she's on Roger's side. But her idea of being on Roger's side looks very different from Eddie's idea of her being on Roger's side. It looks like hitting Roger on the head with a frying pan, so he won't get hurt.
This is like, to touch on a previous episode, which was our best episode of the year, according to Spotify Wrapped. This is like a Jack Sparrow type. Of, this is just someone with their own agenda, constantly shifting loyalty, maybe even, once again, for your specific party, a Jack Sparrow type is going to be the Jessica Rabbit. It's going to be the one like gets them and hooks them.
That
they're
actually,
like,
now that you
I
mention
can't help but like, and like kind of want to trust and want to have scenes with this NPC, even though I kind of know I shouldn't trust them. So one potential thing that could be really interesting if you want to do the core Roger Rabbit mystery story with the Who Killed Marvin Arkmy is the idea that, like, you have a Jessica Rabbit type who killed Marvin Arkmy, but it was so Runetown went to the runes. So they even have this very sympathetic motivation, like, especially if you kind of present them as this kind of crusader for rune rights, and a lot of PCs might glom to that. But this whole, like, no, this guy, we've met this guy, he was just like a sweet doofus. Yeah. He was like a nerd who, like, really did seem sympathetic to runes and want the best for them. And so that's going to be a really interesting kind of divided loyalty of, like, how do we respond to this? How do we feel as a party about this person doing something whose goal we sympathize with, but that ended up killing a very, like, a likable character? Or you could do something like a sort of Jet from Avatar. If you really want to play up the class and prejudice thing, someone who pleads solidarity, who has very sympathetic motivations, but is doing things that make the PCs uncomfortable. Or on the flip side of a Jet from Avatar, you could have a Mayor Bellwether from Zootopia. You could have someone who pleads solidarity, but they're just out for themselves. They, like, are all about rune power, rune solidarity, runes need to stick together, but they really have no sense of solidarity at all. They're just trying to use that idea of solidarity of an underclass to personally climb the ladder.
Or you could even do the double flip around if you wanted to, speaking of Zootopia, and do Nick Wilde.
Yes.
And have it be that, like, at first he's presenting this whoobiest whoopee whoever whoobied face. But then it turns out that's a front because he's pleading solidarity and he's out for himself. But then it turns out he's just a little broken-winged bird.
Exactly, no.
Can help him.
You could have a fantastic Nick Wilde type living spell.
Speaking of Mayor Bellwether and Nick Wilde, this is the closest we are ever going to get to doing a Zootopia domain.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand...
Like a lot of reasons.
Yeah, like Mayor Bellwether would make a really great Dark Lord, but like... a domain that's all about systemic racism doesn't sound fun.
Yeah.
Like, so...
Maybe someday we'll get a flash of inspiration, and we'll decide to do a full domain called Zootopia or something, not copyrighted on the DM's Guild write-up. But, like, as of now, this is it.
Yeah.
In terms of our plans.
Much like how Princess Mononoke is the closest we're ever going to get to a Pocahontas domain, this is the closest we're ever getting to a Zootopia domain.
So, we've done the aging up, we finished the aging down, and now we get to the part that some of you have been waiting for, and some of you have been wondering what we're referencing, and some Rachel might have been waiting for possibly literally 3 weeks, since this has been, as we mentioned, a extended process of recording. Welcome to Tom's Eberron Minute. Yeah! So, I want to explain to you why this should be related to Eberron. And I want to explain that in a way that does not have that many proper nouns.
Good luck, honey.
And a way that is succinct and brief and to the point. And does not involve, like, creation myths. Because Eberron really was the source of this, because that's where we got living spells. Like, that is living spells as a creature, and maybe there was some D&D thing that they were mentioning earlier, but I ran into them as a specific type of creature in Eberron.
Yeah, like living spells are an Eberron thing, like post-war noir setting is Eberron. That's the other thing that, like, this fits. A big part of Eberron is it is trying to be very culturally, politically, a kind of 1920s, 1930s setting. And so noir, it says, it leans into noir and says this is one of the big types of stories that this setting supports. I think it was smart because it kind of does differentiate it from something like Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or whatever. It's this is specifically a setting that politically and culturally and aesthetically is designed to support noir stories. So, doodle-doo, Roger Rabbit. That Eberron gives you what you need to do noir stories. You have politics. You specifically have that kind of post-war politics. You have corporations in the form of these things called dragon mark houses. So you even have a kind of, like, capitalism can be much more of a politically influential thing than necessarily in your default D&D game. And Judge Doom can be the sole stockholder of a dragon mark house.
You can be the sole shareholder of a dragon mark house. And you also just have, with the kind of Magitech setting of Eberron, more of the aesthetics of the kind of classic 1930s, 1940s, 1950s LA noir setting. That, it's not just wagons and carts and thatched roof cottages. It's like, no, you can have skyscrapers, or you can have trolleys, basically. They have a train equivalent at Eberron called the Lightning Rail. So there could be some kind of, like, he manipulates the Dragon Mark house that owns the Lightning Rail to, like, shutting it down.
I mean, you even have, like, in Eberron, it's industrialized magic.
Yeah.
And the magic being part of the economy, and that works super well for what we're doing with the living spells. That the living spells have brought themselves into the economy, like, are just kind of working alongside everybody else. And that works much better in a more high magic setting like Eberron, rather than a thing where people aren't likely to have ever even met a wizard before.
Yeah, you're Greyhawk type. Yeah.
Tasha's laughter,
and getting a comedy show from a living Tasha City's laughter. Yeah, exactly. So Eberron's also a great place to set this if you are like, I really want to do Roger Rabbit. I love the idea of doing D&D Roger Rabbit. I don't necessarily want to do Ravenloft. Then really there's no reason you just can't have Judge Doom as a really powerful living spell pretending to be a human in a city in Eberron.
Yeah.
I give you suggestions. Just now it's proper noun time, baby. So if you're running an Eberron game and you're like, holy wow, I really want to have it living spells and do Who Framed Roger Rabbit in my Eberron game. Then I suggest one of the big cities and having it near the Mournlands, which is where a lot of this, like, where living spells come from in the setting, and also makes sense there'd be crazy wild magic effects. So you could have living spells with this more, like, animate, sentient things. There's a lot of dangers. There's a lot of, like, political intrigue going on. So any of these kind of cities around the Mournlands make good settings for a sort of version of LA. And I went to the, r/Eberron and asked people what would be a good setting, a good city to set a game with these parameters in. And I did not say Roger Rabbit.
No.
But I said a game that involves a lot of political intrigue and noir, and also living spells are a big part of it. And they said, here's a couple things. Karlik 10 is near the Mournlands. It has a lot of dangers. Monsters come out of the Mournlands. Also, a Dragonmark house that's a big supplier of mercenaries and combatants and guards is there. So you could, once again, really easily have sort of a military industrial complex political intrigue that's part of your noir conspiracy.
I could definitely see Judge Doom as a war profiteer.
Yeah, exactly. New Sire. This is right near the border. This is a refugee camp. I'm not going to go into all the things, but basically it's a refugee camp that is now developing into a full-fledged town.
Ooh.
Yeah, right? So there is a lot of potential there, especially if you really want to connect this story with bigger Eberron political conflicts over these refugees.
Or if you really want to play into kind of the immigrant metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. You could absolutely have a lot of really, really, really interesting stuff with the New Sire residents, the New Sire refugees in the ruins. And then finally, Starlasker. I don't know how to pronounce it because these words aren't real. Sterolasker? Maybe Sterolasker. This one is one of those things that can recommend itself in a canon setting in terms of it's super undeveloped. Like, it's there, it's a dot on the map, it's a major trade center, like there's like a couple of lightning rail lines, I think there's a river that goes through there, or a waterfront in some way. It's a major trade area, but that's like all there is about it. And so these can kind of be the best things sometimes in doing stuff in canon settings. If you're like, there is canon a town there, it is canon a major trade setting, which works for Langeles, but that's all there is in canon, so I can do whatever I want and not contradict anything. And of course, that's like a little silly to say, why don't I just do what I want anyway? Canon doesn't matter.
I see you.
But yes, no, but
it is well established that Tom is the one who's going to be like, no, it's like, I'll do what I want, I'm the GM. And I'm like, no.
What if Aslan were a gnome?
No.
He could be a gnome lich. A lich gnome. I do what I want. Whatever.
You can't see the face I'm making. But
you can guess it.
Oh!
What if he were a tiny little skeleton man? The little crown. Little iron crown on his little 3-foot tall skeleton head.
Oh, no, I'm smashing. I'm looking like that stupid gnome from Tower of Doom. No! My face is the facial version of that, no.
But anyway, you're out there, and I know there was people who, when I said, this is a setting with very little established in canon, you did feel the weight lift off your shoulders.
You married one of those people. So.
Oh, good. I can just do whatever I want with this, but I'm not contradicting canon, and I'm not making up something new either. I'm not just taking a Sharpie and drawing a dot on the map and writing my own name under it. So, this concludes Tom's Eberron Minute. Now back to the show.
And then if you are listening to Tom's Eberron Minute and going, but Ravenloft though, once again, there are so many domains in Ravenloft that started out somewhere else, so you can have it be that Langeles started out in Eberron and got pulled into Ravenloft and has all this delicious Eberron backstory and flavor that you can mine. But now it's in Ravenloft, and you can do Ravenloft things with it, kind of like we did with Big Hero 6. So.
Great way to transition, speaking of using canon material, is this could be a place that Sire 1313 takes you.
Yes!
You end up in some other domain, you end up on Sire 1313, next stop, Langeles Station.
Uh-huh.
And there you are. Now you're in this new domain. Go through the train goes through the mist, and you end up in this big noir Magitech city.
Oh, man, what if Judge Doom has some kind of plan involving Sire 1313?
Ooh, I like it.
He knows it.
Yeah,
He's from Eberron, he knows Sire 1313.
I like it. So, that is a whole bunch of different variants of this Roger Rabbit setting. So for younger players, where we had to deeply soft pedal the very spiky movie itself. For older players, where we did not have to really add, we just had to say the quiet part out loud.
Boop, boop, be-doop, boop.
And then Eberron things for people that are specifically love Eberron and want to do Ravenloft Eberron-y crossover stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's give you our parting thoughts on the domain of Langeles in a section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing we like to do in Parting Thoughts is talk about the genre of horror. This is from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. They list the different genres of horror, talk about what different domains, sort of genres they express, talk about the signifiers and the kind of encounters for that genre. I think it's one of the best parts of the book. Mm-hmm. Super useful for planning any kind of horror game. So, I really struggled with this one.
I had a very obvious one and then a less obvious one.
Over to you, because I'm kind of hoping the words will come to me as I talk, and they're not.
Investigation.
Yes! Occult investigation. How could I not have thought of that?
You're a private eye.
Yeah, wow, that was... boy, my face red. I think I had one of those where I just kept thinking ones that don't fit and got brain lock.
Plus it doesn't have the word horror in it.
Yeah,
it's like the only genre of horror that doesn't have the word horror in it.
So yes, thank you. I'm typing it right now in the script so I remember to put it in the write-up. Occult investigation. Love it. Thank you. Boom. Nailed it.
Yes, because even just all this noir stuff we have, it's all about doing your investigation of these occult things that Judge Doom is doing, and eventually finding him as a spider at the center.
And it's even great that, like, occult investigation is sort of that. But, you know, the X-Files, Kolchak, Gravity Falls, like, but there's the secret spooky stuff. And the great thing here is you have that great secret spooky thing, which is the Judge Doom is really a room.
Yes.
Like, that is where you're going from just straightforward noir investigation. Well, that's the point where Roger Rabbit stops being a noir movie that has tunes in it and becomes a noir movie about tunes.
Yes.
And that could be your occultiness.
Yes.
Oh, I love this.
Thank you. The one other thing, and I don't think there's even enough of it to, like, put into the write-up, but I think that there's a little like, grace note in the flavor palette of Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a cosmic horror.
Yes, I can definitely see that. I was that's one of the places my mind was going cosmic horror, but I'm like, not really. We only in our weird aging up version more so.
Well, not even only in our weird aging up version, because, like, imagine when Eddie goes to Toontown, all the stuff that's happening to him not played for laughs. That is cosmic horror. That is Bill Cipher.
You're bringing fire tonight,
Thank you,
honey.
Like Weird Mageddon is basically Toontown.
Yes.
In horror mode.
And that is a specific thing. So yeah, I'm not going to put that in the write up. That is a wonderful observation.
Thank you.
I was trying to think something with psychological horror with the noir. This kind of kept fixating on the sort of discovery of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
But, like, part of the thing with noir, and once I'm not an expert on this, is my, like, very amateurish understanding of the genre, is the whole, it's kind of not horror because it's so cynical. It's sort of like, well, what'd you expect? Like, of course. This goes all the way to the top. And, like, maybe the extent of the conspiracy or the specific evil things they're doing might be moments, but it's more like moral revulsion than horror.
Yeah.
Like, they're supposed to have this kind of maybe sense of revulsion, but not like, I'm scared. And maybe psychological with that whole, oh my gosh, I've angered these powerful people and they're going to have me disappeared kind of thing. But that's like such a, like, kind of around the edges.
Yeah, that's even more around the edges than Cosmic. Because we don't get the sense that, like, Eddie's looking over his shoulder constantly wondering if the weasels are going to pop out and, you know, put a bag over his head and make him sleep with the fishes.
Yeah. So, yes, thank you. Occult investigation, and absolutely, you can lead into cosmic horror if you chose to. I think you nailed it. Boom.
Thank you. And also with cosmic horror, just like, and again, this is not like the alpha timeline, but it's an AU way to spin it, is that, you know, kind of like we were talking about in the aging up with these living spells are weird, and we were talking about how they're weird in a very aging up way. But it doesn't even have to be that. It could just be how weird and alien and, like, not thinking like people they are. So, like, you could do a version of Roger Rabbit where he will do anything for a laugh. And it could be all the things that he's going to do for just, like, a regular person for a laugh. Or, like, it could be, you know, trying to make just an awful sadistic sociopath laugh. He could be the Joker. That's not the version of it that I would do, but you could do an interesting cosmic horror thing there.
So, the next thing I'd like to talk about, after, fortunately, Rachel is here to explain to the genre, is what kind of game to run. Now, some domains, like Barovia, like Darkon, are made to run full, big, large, complex campaigns, you know? Barovia, even the scaled-down Barovia and Curse of Strahd can fill Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
Can give you a... People play this game for, like, years and years, level 1 to 11 kind of campaign.
That's before you add in all the stuff that they left out of Curse of Strahd.
Other domains are like Sire 1313, where there's really kind of one story. And it's really meant to be like maybe a one-shot, or maybe like a 2 or a 3-shot, but it's like, this domain exists to do this one specific story. You're not going to do a years of gameplay, level 1 to 10 campaign on Sire 1313.
Yeah.
Snowpiercer is just, it's a movie.
Yeah.
And it's not really going to work for an extended, long, epic story. And with this one, absolutely, this could be a campaign.
Yes.
Like, this is a rich enough setting that you easily could be doing your level 1 to 10 game in Langeles. Right? Like, they could have made, like, 5 more movies about Eddie Valiant and Roger Rabbit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or Eddie Valiant, like, doing other Toon investigation stuff with other conspiracies.
Yes.
And the one kind of limiter is that specifically focusing on Judge Doom. The one kind of limiter, if you're just like, it's going to be like, my detectives are in Langeles, where there's runes, we're investigating various crimes. Once again, you could write, like, this is one of those series where it's like a dozen paperbacks about the same detective solving mysteries. And those things are endless.
Like, especially, we're just focusing on Langeles, but, like, if you wanted to kind of spread things out a bit and have it be like, it's all of Southern California, Langeles is just the capital, my gosh, the conspiracies you can have.
Yeah. But we are specifically positing that Judge Doom is sort of the evil star that all the evil conspiracies orbit in this setting as the Dark Lord. And that is going to put a bit of a limitation. There's only so many times they can tangle with Judge Doom before it gets a little Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah,
before it gets a little Cobra Commander. Before it's like, what is this week's plan to destroy Toontown?
So the version of this that we've done before for kind of how to balance this is kind of what we already talked about with Radigan in our Great Mouse Detective episode. That, like, in Great Mouse Detective, we're seeing Radigan as the spider at the center of the web in much the way that Judge Doom is. But you don't want to fight Radigan every session. That is really going to take the wind out of Radigan's sails. But we're talking about the whole, since he's the Napoleon of crime, you can be working your way up. You're fighting these goons, and then you go up and you find, like, the crime boss who's in charge of those goons, but then there's another guy behind him, and another guy behind him, and the guy behind all of them is Radigan.
Yeah.
So you could have a similar thing with Judge Doom, where you find this conspiracy, and you trace it back to this, like, corrupt bureaucrat. And, okay, yeah, we solved the conspiracy, but no, there's somebody who's above that corrupt bureaucrat. No, doing that unraveling mystery where there's somebody pulling strings at the end, and that guy is Judge Doom. And the fact that it's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, they're gonna kind of know.
Probably figure out that there is a judge named Doom. Also, I mean, even if they've never seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the fact there's a significant NPC named Judge Doom might be a clue that it's the bad guy.
I read a not very good fantasy book, but one of my favorite bits in it was that there was a character in it. He was kind of the Dr. Doom XP, and his name was Vladimir Von Dread. And one of the characters, like, refers to him, and another one says, wait, he pronounces his name that way? I thought it was Von Dreed.
It's Dumet.
Yes.
It's French. So, yeah, absolutely. Like, my preference would probably be, like, a 1 or a 2 part, like, a kind of abbreviated version of what Rachel said, where you're maybe doing, like, 3 levels. You find a conspiracy, that leads you to a bigger conspiracy, that leads you to Judge Doom, but you absolutely could do a kind of Curse of Strahd type game if you structure the mystery plot the right way.
You also actually could do, if you want to do kind of Curse of Strahd and you wanted to reveal Judge Doom earlier because his name's Judge Doom.
Yeah.
Your players have seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That, like, Judge Doom's making his plans, but then there's somebody else who's making their plans, and it's kind of like Judge Doom and this other guy. Again, maybe you could bring him to somebody who's like a bellwether analog, since this is the closest we're ever getting to its Utopia domain. And they've got, like, their dueling schemes going on, and people are getting caught in the middle of it.
Oh, I like it, yeah.
That automatically adds another level.
Oh, yeah. And a lot more story potential, not get repetitive.
Yeah, like, especially if the bellwether type is a Toon. I'm sorry, a rune.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Totally different.
And she's doing this thing to kind of be ramping up sympathy for runes. Not tunes. Totally different.
Gonna get us sued. Gonna get a takedown.
But it's really just like a power grab. Like that
I love that. Yeah, that's really cool. Because they even have the nice, like, two jerks being jerks fighting. And it really is a real dilemma for the PCs. And they even get we mentioned this in the Sean Yu Peddler's Tales, which is the close we're gonna have to Mulan episode.
Yeah.
The PCs can legitimately choose kind of who to side with. Like, there isn't, like, a bad guy. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, who they decide is the lesser of two evils. It's a completely balanced scale. So they literally have, like, either as a viable option for lesser of two evils.
Yeah, yeah.
If you do want to do this wider thing, I would say a good thing to do would be to look at one of these, like, long-running detective series.
Yeah,
and kind of see how they pace stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think a big feature you have is you're going to kind of have these recurring NPCs.
Yes.
So we're going to have, like, what's it? If they could have made a half dozen more Eddie Valiant mysteries. Mm-hmm. And there would have been, like, Dolores would have been his, like, referring character. I think it was Lieutenant, like, Santino or something. It was, like, clearly, that's your classic. The guy who got force cooked
by Darth Vader.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, like, your classic, you know, the sort of lieutenant who's very sympathetic to the PI. And he's kind of, like, on their side. But he can't, like, directly help him because of all the politics.
Yeah, yeah.
But he'll be like, all right, don't tell him you got this file from me. And that's the last time I'm going to stick my neck out for you, Valiant. Mm-hmm. Or then there's, like, the jerk cop with the mustache. Yeah. Who's always... So those could have been these, like, recurring characters in many, many more Eddie Valiant mysteries.
Yeah, like, I'm even thinking, because the main one of these that I'm familiar with, that a lot of our listeners are probably also familiar with, is Dresden Files. Mm. And I've only read about halfway through Dresden Files, so no spoilers. But, like, I could see... I'm sure this isn't what happens, but I could see a version of Dresden Files where Gentleman Johnny Marcone becomes, like, the big bad of the setting. But he doesn't start out that way. Mm-hmm. Like, he starts out as just one more antagonist on the board that Dresden has to deal with. Mm-hmm. And that's another way you could structure this, is that, like, Judge Doom is the spider at the center of the web, or maybe even just ultimately, like, puts himself in the position to be the spider at the center, right? Like, maybe he's, like, he is the Dark Lord, but part of his torment is he's not quite there yet. Mm. And, like, you're kind of watching his power grow as this game is continuing, and, like, he's in the background just accruing more and more and more power. So kind of like looking at one of those recurring antagonists from one of these series could be a fun way to do that.
So we talked about bringing in a whole bunch of other media, but to kind of once again get back to the remit of our podcast, bringing in older Ravenloft material, especially material from kind of the older 2E, 3E stuff.
Yes.
Rachel, this seems like a really weird question that I don't think anyone in human history has ever asked before. Is there a way to incorporate older Ravenloft material with Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is. All right, so I'm going to start with the newer Ravenloft material. I'm gonna ease us in with the 5e. Which is, if you don't want to bring in Eberron stuff, if you're like, can I just have my Ravenloft be Ravenloft?
How many imaginary worlds
am I supposed
do I
to care
need
about?
to, like, how many nonsense place names do I need to memorize?
Well, for this one, it's Ravenloft and Thay.
All right, yeah.
Because one really obvious, just completely within Ravenloft origin point for Runetown would be 5e Haslan.
Yes, yes.
That, they've got all this weird, wild magic experimentation, pushing the boundaries of magic. You could really see Haslick or one of his apprentices doing some kind of crazy explosion that leads to all these living spells being created. And then, something, they split off and form their own thing and become Runetown. Like, that part's kind of fuzzy. On a related note to that, before we get into just, like, kind of the pure older material, we were thinking about putting this in Adventure Hooks, but that we ended up moving it down here because it's bringing in other Ravenloft elements. Judge Doom hates Haslan and Darkon so much.
Yes, he does.
So much. Some of his conspiracies could really easily involve, like, bringing in magical items from Hazlan and Darkon just to destroy them. Like, especially the more powerful magic item, the better, because that's, feeding his counterspell powers. And Azalin and Hazlic hate him so much.
We love it. We can have Dark Lords in conflict, because that's a really fun place to put the PCs into.
Absolutely. And yeah, Judge Doom, he hates both of these domains of the Fiery Pasture of a Thousand Burning Suns. Probably especially Hazlic, because Azalin at least has some order going on.
Yeah.
Like, Judge Doom appreciates the order and the vision. Hazlic has no vision. He just likes blowing stuff up. He just likes moving fast and breaking things.
I hope I'm not impugning the honor or aesthetic taste of Azalin Rex. But I could see him visioning a freeway. Being like, I'm going to build the greatest road. Going to build a road through Darkon. Mile after mile of beautiful billboards.
My God.
It will be beautiful. On and off, all day and all night.
Yeah.
Like, does that seem fair?
I can see it. So, okay, so that's kind of our 5e portion of the show and our bring in some adventure hooks. One really creepy hint that he's doing this, and he's, like, stealing these things just to counterspell them. You could find stuff that are, like, they're magic items, and they've been depleted of all their charges, but they're not magic items that use charges.
Ooh, that is cool.
Just like,
drained of energy.
Yeah. So that's it for kind of our 5e stuff. Now, if you want to bring in some of the older material, if you're going with some of, like, the older metaplot stuff, there are a couple different sources for Runetown that you could have. And one of them is, we mentioned Darkon. We mentioned this before in Darkon. There was the Requiem. It was this, like, huge explosion of negative energy that Azalin used to try and basically harness enough life energy to ride it out and escape from Darkon. And it just ended up turning Illaluk into a horrible city of the undead. You could have it be that, like, all of the positive energy went somewhere. All of the positive energy and, like, life and vibrancy. Like, it makes it kind of like, it makes a cartoon logic sense. Like, it's life, it's vibrancy, it's potential. It's like, it's the opposite of undeath. Like, all of that kind of exploded outward, and you could even have it then be that, like, Langeles is sort of a mirror city to Illaluk.
Oh, I like that, yeah.
That you go and it almost looks like Illaluk used to look, but nothing is quite right. And then, again, you could really bring in some interesting stuff with conflict between Judge Doom and Azalin, because Azalin would not like that Langeles is basically stealing his blueprint to do this chaotic wild magic stuff. He does not approve. Speaking of wild magic, there was a domain called Vekor. The Dark Lord was Isan the Mad.
And it sounds applicable.
Yeah, he was this insane wild magic sorcerer. And part of the domain reflecting the Dark Lord and his curse, because part of his curse was his madness and that he was trying to, like, get some control over his mind and he couldn't, was he could sort of, like, reshape the land, however he visualized it. And, like, it's like in Friendship is Magic when Discord is running things for a while. And the people in Vekor are just walking along like, oh, okay, it's raining puppies today. Sure, why not? That's a thing that can happen.
That is the closest. I don't know if there was any connection direct, but that's the closest probably Ravenloft equivalent in canon of Toontown.
Yeah. So you could really easily have it be that Isan the Mad deliberately or accidentally created Runetown.
Yeah.
And either, like, he's not even aware that it exists because he created it accidentally, or he created it kind of like on a lark and then it broke away and became its own thing. The last kind of possible Toontown origin that you could have that I'm finding now as I'm doing my research for our next Book Club of Dread episode, which, if you missed the last episode, we are going to be doing the Nightmare Lands, the second edition. Gonzo, combining really cool, creepy Nightmare on Elm Street horror with 2E mechanics.
And you eat your inner peace chart. Roll percentile dice.
You accrue enough mental fortitude points to reach your inner peace number. And that's how you beat the Nightmare Court. It's going to be so fun. But one of the things that they had was that if a nightmare becomes vivid enough, that you can actually create a sort of dream spawn-like thing that, like, emerges from your head and kind of becomes a ghost that's haunting you, but it's from your dreams.
Interesting.
So you could do, like, one day the Nightmare Court bit off something more than they could chew, and we're getting into the dreams of, like, a really powerful wizard or a god. You know, we were talking about Vecna a lot in our Shan Yu episode, but, you know, Vecna was canonically in Ravenloft.
Yeah.
So you could have it be that, like, the Nightmare Court maybe was messing with Vecna or with Gwydion or with, you know, all kinds of people, and he vomited out all of these, like, dream spawn as living spells.
Vecna dreams about cartoons. Or Gwydion.
Yeah, he was, like, running a high fever that
just
night.
dreaming about golden age Looney Tunes cartoons.
This is if you want to really lean into the cosmic horror. Like, if you want to do, like, Nightmare Toontown, then this is the way to do it.
So, that gives you a number of possibilities to incorporate this Toontown domain into an ongoing Ravenloft game, especially one that is using some of the older 2E3 material. And then finally, let's conclude our discussion of Langeles with talking about the strengths and challenges of running a game here. Strengths. It's great.
It's Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's if you were to argue this is one of the top 20 best movies ever made.
I mean, I would.
Yeah, you're not crazy. Yeah. It's a great, as we've mentioned a couple times, it's a great introduction to noir. Like, we love a rich evocative setting, but this is not only a rich evocative thematic setting, it's one that has a kind of built-in narrative structure. So this is so easy to just say, like, all right, what's my conspiracy? All right, what's my inciting incident? Who are my NPCs involved? And then go from there. And plan your campaign here. Judge Doom is amazing, and the spider in the center of the web is a great Dark Lord narrative. It's a great way to kind of, Rachel did this whole campaign idea where you can have, you're kind of always in conflict with the Dark Lord, but they're not Cobra Commander. They're not like constantly directly being beaten by the PCs, but they're always lurking in the background. Judge Doom's great because he's a schemer, he's a climber, and once again, the nice thing here is you don't beat him in a boss fight, but you can get to a sort of Ravenloft victory of you're foiling his schemes. You're stopping his next seizure of power. You stop that and get that victory. Rachel, what about some of the challenges?
Okay, so it's not as bad as Nightmare Before Christmas or Lord Help Us Tron.
Lord Help Us Tron.
The other day, it was October, and I was like, hey, Nightmare Before Christmas. What else did we do with that one again? And I was re-listening to it, and we kept saying, well, we're never going to do a domain this weird again.
My sweet summer children.
My sweet summer children. So we did not, in fact, do a domain this weird in this case, but it is still really weird.
It's pretty weird.
It's weird, it's high concept, and, like, the whole living spell thing is going to be a lot of exposition for your PCs. Some of them are just not going to get it.
Yeah.
It also means that a lot of world building is going to be on your shoulders as to, like, what is Runetown? Like, mechanically, how does all that Looney Tunes stuff work? Like, where did the runes come from? Do you want it to be Eberron? Do you want it to be Hazland? Do you want it to be Gwydion Dreams of Electric Sheep?
Are there cars?
Yeah, are there cars? Like, is there a trolley? Is there a freeway? And for some of you, we're threatening you with a good time. Some of you were like, just need the very basic skeleton to hang your hat on. I hang my hat on skeletons all the time.
Halloween decorations.
Yes. And then you're just gonna go nuts. But others of you, that's just not gonna be your bag.
We're giving you, like, a lot of homework.
Yes.
If you're like, I want to do this, you're like, but what do I do?
What do I do?
Are there cars?
Like with a lot of the movies we do, the tone is very tricky here. The movie is so slapstick, and it's hard to do that with horror. But if your players know that you're doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that's what they're going to be expecting.
Yeah.
And, like, if your players know you're doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like, you might be really excited by this idea of doing cosmic horror tunes, or, like, tunes that are a Dark Lord's nightmares or something. But that's, your players are going to be like, but I wanted to flirt with Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah, I just want to do Roger Rabbit.
I wanted B.B. Herman to slap me on the butt and call me Toots. Like, this isn't what I thought I was getting. And it's such a perfect tonal balancing act. There is a legitimately interesting noir conspiracy. There is legitimate darkness.
Yeah.
But it's so silly.
Yeah.
And you've got, Judge Doom coming with a giant animated buzzsaw. That's so scary. And that came right after Eddie Valiant doing this whole slapstick routine where he kicks you in the nose.
Yeah.
So, like, if you want to do that tone, Godspeed is going to be really hard.
Yes.
And if you want to do a different tone, you're going to have to communicate that to your players because that's not what they're going to expect. And if you want to do that tone, it's going to be really weird coming off of, like, Curse of Strahd.
That's always a nice rule of thumb for us, is, like, if you ran Curse of Strahd, you're like, I want to keep the Ravenloft adventures going. And then, like, what would that be? Like, then you're in Toontown.
Yeah. Then Taffy Duck and Donald Duck are getting into a piano fight and blowing each other up with cannons. Speaking of blowing each other up with cannons, if they actually go to Runetown, which they should, the players might expect it to be functioning on, like, cartoon logic, and then suddenly you're going to have to be coming up with a completely different rule set. Part of why we haven't done an Emperor's New Groove episode yet is because we're hoping to do kind of like how to do Looney Tunes logic in D&D in that episode. And so we'll be able to help you then. But we haven't yet, because it's hard.
That's a big, tall order.
Yeah, like, how does damage even work? Like, when Eddie was falling off the building, and then he gets the spare tire, like, you know that if he landed, he would have been splatted flat as a pancake and been fine. Or, like, he could have put the tire under himself and then bounced. But how do you do stuff like that and have there be consequences? Like, it's tricky. Godspeed. But, yeah, it's tricky, but it sounds gonzo and awesome. So I would totally play something in Langeles.
Like a lot of our challenges, it's like there are some DMs for whom these challenges are insurmountable. There are some DMs who right now we're threatening you with a good time. Like some DMs are hearing off like, oh, I know, I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and I know exactly what I do here.
Yes.
And I think it'll be amazing transition going from Curse of Strahd. It'll be a hilarious tonal flip around. I am ready. But those are, as we said, for some DMs, those will be big challenges.
Yes.
So if they want to reach out to us and tell us about how they would do Eddie Valiant turning flat into a pancake till somebody comes along and blows air in his thumb and inflates him like a balloon and he's fine back to full HP, how can they reach out to us?
Or how would you transition from Curse of Strahd to Roger Rabbit? Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Tumblr, or Patreon at Wonderful World of Darklords. And on YouTube, where we have very active listeners. It's great. We're just Wonderful World of Darklord there, but look for Maleficent holding the apple.
Pretty unmissable.
Yeah. Thanks, Halite.
So if you are like, wow, they did a Tron. How would that? That does sound weird and high concept. We not only did a Tron domain, we did a Tron Adventure, which there's a link in the domain write-up for this. And we have a number of other adventures where I've adapted some horror movies into D&D adventures. They're on DM's Guild. If you just go to the write-up for this and click on More by this author, or search for Tom Kohler, you will find them. And speaking of if you appreciate our extreme sensitivity to the extremely kid unsensitive Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we also have some resources for adapting spookier, more horror-themed adventures and gameplay for younger players.
And then speaking of things for younger people, I have a picture book, Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. It's exactly what it sounds like. And I also have a website, www.rachelkohler.com, where you can find some of my short stories for adults. I don't think I can thematically connect any of them to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that is a tragedy.
Until next time.
Next time, which I am extremely excited about because I think this is our most requested domain.
Yes, it is. So, pretty much by far. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, which will be exciting.
Yes.
Thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. I reported the sabotage of the concert hall to the authorities, although I do not know whether they will take any action. With luck, they can at least halt construction before anyone comes to harm. It seems that the strange magical effects that have followed me since San Francisco were somehow linked to wild magic. Perhaps I am simply experiencing surges at a far less frenetic rate than one does in Runetown? Thus far, they have been uniformly helpful, which is a fortunate stroke given the arbitrary nature of wild magic. If Doom truly is some kind of living counterspell or dispel magic, it is tempting to absolve him of his campaign against the runes, for he is fulfilling his nature as surely as those living floating discs in mage hands. However, by setting his sight on mortal loose ends, to say nothing of anyone who would have been hurt or killed when the concert hall collapsed, he is going far beyond his mandate. As I held the journal with the map through the mists to my next destination, I wondered how Doom could be so callous in regards to collateral damage. Admittedly, in the past few years, I have done a lot of things I am not proud of. Breaking and entering, commanding a hellhound in a demented nightmare carnival, poisoning, but nobody got hurt. Well, maybe somebody got hurt, but nobody I knew. Regards, D.
Living embodiments of magic. Fascinating. Did my little witch note any of these runes made of divine magic? An apothecary employing manifestations of healing spells would be quite useful, and if one could replicate it elsewhere. How long can these runes survive outside of Runetown, or unable to fulfill their function? If a new spell was created within Langeles, would it create a rune as well? There are endless applications for these runes that require further research. Perhaps one could be contained within an object to create a powerful relic. A pity this doom cannot fathom anything beyond destroying them. As for the magical surges you've been experiencing, you are correct. Wild magic must be its source. Such magic is chaotic as the runes themselves, and uncontrollable. I will research ways to extract it from your being. As beneficial as it has been, it's only a matter of time before it harms you, or someone you care for. Perhaps repeating what triggered the surges in San Francisco will rid you of this curse.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at darklordaslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. I'll know what that means.
Sexy Betty Boop.
Sexy Betty Boop. I'll know what that means.
You have politics. You have...
You have ice machines?
Ice machines. This concludes Tom's Eberron Minute. Now back to the... Okay, we'll do it again.
Imagine when the cat goes into the bathroom and the can just screech like a haunted house.
Really helping tonight.
Yeah, Coraline is on fire tonight. Then you could do a similar thing where...
Goodness. You are so helpful tonight.
Where you get the cat who's rubbing her face all over your laptop. We're just going to have a Coraline purring into the mic.
Yeah, sorry. If you hear a background white noise, it's Coraline is feeling very friendly tonight.